and welcome to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast. My name is Jesse, and I'll be your host. So on today's episode, we're going to go to Mass over at St. Bernard's Academy. We're going to go play a rousing game of light as a feather, stiff as a board with our, new friends. And then also we're going to go invoke the spirit of like a fake deity and just, try to rule the world. But anyway, regardless of that, today's episode, we're going to be covering 1996's The Craft. Now, I can't do this episode alone, mainly because I myself am not a female, and I think this movie is very female-centric, and I wanted to get a perspective on that. So, I have one of your favorite previous guests of my show. That's right, she's been on Cruel Intentions, she was on Clueless, and she was also on Dazed and Confused. She is my brother from another mother, but actually my sister from my same mother, I guess. She is Sarah Heidelberg. Hey, Sarah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
That's good. So we're here at her home, recording as we do sometimes. And, the dog's here. I hope she's going to be good. She's sleeping right now, which is very cute. And also, if you hear any children, listen, that's just the way of the world, okay? We can't do anything about that. I'm not going to be the mean old lady at the house. But anyway, my history though with this film, I would say, we'll both talk about this. My history with this film is that I saw it when I was a kid. It came out when we were children, pretty much. I honestly don't know how I came across watching it. It was either on television, maybe, perhaps, or maybe we just were able to rent it from Blockbuster. I don't know. But I definitely remember seeing it because I remember the end and being like, what the fuck is this? What do you think?
I think our mom watched it.
Okay.
Clearly, as all these movies seem to stem.
Yes.
I don't know if it was on TV or if we did rent it and watched it that way, or if it just was on TV and we watched it. But I do remember being a couple years old and watching it.
Yeah.
Being between the ages of probably like 6, 7, 8.
Exactly.
Watching, yeah.
And I would have been younger, but I still remember seeing it in our old house we had back in the day, back in the 90s. But, but I do think that this...
30-some years ago.
Exactly. Oh my God, Jesus, we're old. But anyway, I think with, this film in particular, I would say it's definitely considered a cult classic. Not all of it works. We'll talk about it. But I will give this movie some kind of credit for at least being something that was a little bit more original. It's an original tale. It was written by men, though, which it's supposed to be a female story, but it's written by men. But whatever. Sometimes that can work out, and sometimes it doesn't. But I give it the originality. It was about witches. It's about, that kind of stuff. So that's cool. Yeah, I would say definitely this is a cult classic. It seemed to do well in terms of financials because, it was definitely geared towards teens. We'll also talk about that, too. But I think, why not cover it? Let's do that. And plus also right now it is streaming places, so you can very easily watch it. It was on Tubi a minute ago and, all that. So I just think it's my obligatory The Craft episode on our good old podcast about cult cinema stuff. But as we do normally on this show, we were going to talk about, some of the production history of the movie. We'll talk a little bit about, just some of how this movie came to be. We'll then move into a plot summary and all that. So without further ado, we'll get to some of these figures of the movie. So The Craft was released on May 3rd, 1996. It had an estimated budget of about $15 million. Again, this is coming from IMDb, so take that with whatever you want. The box office for this film was about, in the US and Canada, we're looking at about $24,819,936 that's posted. An international box office, we're looking at about $30 million, $30 million pretty much. And then we're looking at about a gross worldwide of $55 million pretty much. So this film, in all intents and purposes, did do fairly well financially. I think because it was targeted towards teens, that would eat it up. We're looking at a 57% on Rotten Tomatoes, on the Tomato Meter, and a 65% audience score. Looking at an IMDb score of 6.4 out of 10, and a Letterboxd score of 3.6 out of 5. We're then looking at our cast of characters. We have Robin Tunney as Sarah Bailey, Fairuza Balk as Nancy Downs, Neve Campbell as Bonnie Harper, Rachel True as Rochelle Zimmerman, Skeet Ulrich as Chris Hooker. Hooker. Cliff DeYoung as Mr. Bailey, Robin Tunney's dad. Christine Taylor as Laura Lizzie, Brady Bunch movie, hey. Breckin Meyer as Mitt, one of Skeet Ulrich's friends. Trey is played by Nathan Marston. Helen Shaver as Grace Downs, who I believe is the mother of Fairuza Balk, Nancy. Lirio is played by Assumpta Serna. The street preacher, which is a nice way of saying the homeless man with the snake, is William Newman. And then we have Dr., and I'm totally ripping this off from another podcast, but we have Dr. Desperate Housewife, Brenda Strong is the doctor, who does that thing on, what's her name? Bonnie. So, okay. Yeah, she's Dr. Desperate Housewife, because she was on Desperate Housewives. Oh. So, some critical response codes we have for The Craft are as follows. We have David Stratton from At the Movies in Australia, so down under, saying it's a depressingly mundane affair which can't make up its mind whether it's a comedy or a teen romance or a horror thriller. Okay. We then have Brandon Collins from Medium Popcorn that says the effects are obviously a bit rough around the edges and the acting is very mixed. That's fair. And then we got our boy Trace Thurman from the Horror Queers and also Bloody Disgusting, who he has editorials there, who states masquerades as a female empowerment film despite prioritizing the toxicity that can be rampant in groups of friends, female or otherwise. If you also want a great podcast on this episode or on this movie, go check out Horror Queers. They talked about this film and they did a really good job with it. So I have definitely listened to it. Before we move into any kind of plot summary about The Craft in particular, I just wanted to go over some information about how this movie exactly came to be. This is also directed by Andrew Fleming, who we have done an episode on one of his other films, which was Dick, back in 1999. Oh, okay. He directed that. He directed this. It was also, I believe, co-written by, I believe Douglas Wick was the producer. And then we have the screenplays by Peter Filardi and Andrew Fleming. And then we have Douglas Wick as the producer. Also, one of the other producers is Lisa Tornell. She's a co-producer on this. And she actually was one of the people involved in Jawbreaker. All my episodes all come back to that movie. I'm just saying. But anyway. But before we move into anything, like I said, we're going to go over how this movie actually came to be. So, according to my wonderful Wikipedia, the concept for The Craft came out from a collaboration between the producer, Douglas Wick, who wanted to create a film about the high school experience blended with witchcraft, and this screenwriter, Peter Filardi, who extensively researched the topic and wrote the initial draft of the film. Andrew Fleming then was hired to direct and produce the final version of the screenplay, and he also was probably instrumental within writing it as well. And keeping in mind, too, that he is also a gay man as well. So this is from, being directed by a gay man was great, depending on how you feel about it, I guess. So production actually did enlist the help of a real-life Wiccan by the name of Pat Devin to help be an on-set advisor for this film, which is nice. So Manal is actually not real, thank God, because this lady was like, we should not be invoking actual real spirits, so let's make one up for the film. Right. Because you don't need, exactly. She wrote the incantations used, and she ensured that the treatment of the Wicca subject matter was as accurate and respectful as possible, that they could do. I will also put to rest any kind of ugly rumors. Not really ugly rumors, but so Fairuza Balk obviously is a standout in this movie. She's very much just her character's unhinged at some point, but I think people have said she herself was a practicing Wiccan and that's why this was so deep for her. I think she has even said that she herself actually was not really a Wiccan. She just happened to actually buy, I think after the movie or whatever, she bought an occult shop in the LA area that she owned pretty much. And then she ended up selling to the people who were already running it. So I think that was kind of the major thing she did. I don't think she herself was deep into Wicca or anything. But anyway, in regards to casting, a bunch of people were seen for this film. So 85 other actresses screen tested for the roles, including apparently Angelina Jolie. Okay, fair. Scarlett Johansson and apparently Alicia Silverstone. But then Rachel True and Fairuza Balk were the first to be cast in their respective roles. Fairuza Balk coming from Return to Oz, which is on Disney Plus if you want to watch it. It's a continuation of the Oz story. It's just creepier. And Rachel True is from the show Half and Half back in the 90s, 2000s. She also is in the movie Embrace of the Vampire, which is a low-budget horror movie from the 90s. It was right around this time. But also was in Nowhere with Greg Araki, with his little film camp that he had. And apparently she sells tarot cards and like does that stuff, which is really cool. We'll talk about Rachel True a little bit. But I will say also with the casting of Rochelle in particular, this was rewritten for this movie when Rachel True was cast, because initially this person was not, Rochelle was not somebody who was going to be dealing with racism. It was more so an eating disorder. And she does talk about this in a documentary called Horror Noir, which is on Shudder right now. And if you can watch it, please do. It talks about Black representation in horror films, really gives you a history on films in general with Black representation. And it's very interesting. I would definitely highly recommend it. But she's on it too. And she talks a little bit about her experience as an actress and having done the craft and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, we'll talk about just how we kind of feel about it a little bit too, in regards to the Rachel True subplot in this as well. Robin Tunney was initially cast as Bonnie, but the producers decided she'd be better off as Sarah. Hey, Sarah. And she persuaded to accept despite preferring Neve Campbell in that role. So they just switched, it seemed like.
Okay.
And
it was a good choice having
I do too.
Robin Tunney be Sarah.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. And then, of course, pretty much everyone knows, I feel like, Robin Tunney was in a movie before this called Empire Records, which is a fantastic movie, and I would love to cover it at some point, and probably will. But she had shaved her head for that role, where she plays this, like, kind of gothy, on the brink, sort of suicidal, like, employee at Empire Records. Mm-hmm. And she literally shaved her head for it. So in this film, which was shot afterward, she is wearing the only wig that's not very good, apparently. She wears a full wig throughout this whole thing. So that's definitely something that people have criticized. But you know what? Wig technology has gotten better.
Well, I was looking at the trivia earlier, just because I think I said this in the previous podcast. Normally, if I watch a movie, whether I've seen it a bunch or it's a movie that's kind of older, I don't want to say older, but like it's a movie that is known that sometimes you just don't ever get around to seeing. And, you know, with all these streaming services, like, you're able to watch it. So sometimes when I watch a movie and it's something that's been out for a while, then I can do the trivia. Right. Or I'll read the spoilers or trivia stuff just to see, you know, fun things or where it was shot at. And I just read, like, when I was catching up on it, watching it, like, I just looked at the trivia. That was like the first thing. I had no idea. Yeah. And I just recently, so I've watched The Craft since, I watched it in the 90s for sure.
Absolutely.
A couple times since then, of course. Actually, funny enough, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, I found a shirt, a craft shirt. It was at Spencer's or something. Yeah. I'm not wearing it. No. Because like our previous podcast that we did, I was all clueless out. Yes. But I do actually, funny enough, have a shirt. I think it says "We're the Weirdos" or something. Because that's like the line they say in the movie. Unfortunately, I think I got a little bleach on it, which makes me sad. Oh no! Because you know, like with bleach, like if you wear something black, it'll turn like a reddish, like orange color. Yeah. So I think it's upstairs in one of my dressers, and anyway, so that's kind of like off topic stuff. But I do have a craft shirt just because I was like, oh, it's cool. It's like the kind of like the, if you've ever seen the DVD cover, it's kind of like that where it's like all 4 girls walking. Yeah. And I think it says that. So, but anyway, I had seen Craft a bunch, but I actually just, in the past, I would say 2 years, I just recently watched Empire Records. Oh, yeah. I heard it was good, and it was on Tubi or one of the streaming services. And I actually, funny enough, I think it was the same day, or like I watched one day and one the other, or it was the same day I watched Empire Records and Mermaids, because I'd never seen those. Oh, right. And good old I had heard about them, but I never watched them, so I actually watched Empire Records and was like, this is a really cool movie. And so I knew Robin Tunney from The Craft, and then seeing her in Empire Records, well, hey, you know. Yeah. But I did not know that they apparently this was like post-production or something, or whatever it was, that her head was like, I guess her hair was still growing back.
Yeah.
All that. So I had no idea that this hair was a wig.
It was a wig.
And of course, I'm sorry, when you're like 5, 6, 7...
you're not caring about the wigs like that, right? It's not until you're older, you're like, oh, that was a wig.
Well, there is a part, which you'll get into, that Christine Taylor wears a wig.
Yeah.
Because of what happened.
Ooh,
but that looks like a wig.
Ooh, that's a wig, bitch. That's a wig.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it. And then, of course, this movie is very squarely in Los Angeles, so much so. Like, Jesus Lord. It takes place in there, so I will say it's definitely an LA movie for sure. So much of that. But yeah, I'm trying to think of what else there would be. Do you have any other like little fun facts you can think of about this film that we can talk about? So yeah, generally some guy wanted to make a movie about witches in the high school, and this is what came about it.
Not really, honestly. I mean, I didn't really look up too many fun facts. The only other thing I thought of was, and not realizing it, because for some reason I think I thought this movie came out like 97 or 98.
I know, right?
But when I saw Skeet, Ulrich, and Neve Campbell, we all know that they were in Scream together. Yep. And when you were saying the dates, like this came out before. Yep. A couple months before, because didn't Scream come out around Christmas?
Yes it did.
Because I was like, because when you were saying that, I was going to say something that I figured I'd wait. That's the only thing, is them kind of being...
It is so weird to me, where I'm just like...
the craft together.
Exactly, yeah.
Although they're not really playing too much together as they were in Scream.
No.
But them kind of reuniting for that.
Yeah.
Oh, and also Breckin Meyer.
Yes, from Clueless. Freddy's Dead and all that.
When he came on, it was kind of one of those things where, like, I forgot he was actually in it until he came up. And he doesn't have, like, a major role. He's got a very, very side role, just kind of playing, like, almost like a jester almost. I feel like that.
He's like an asshole,
kind of playing like a jerk. And, but I totally forgot that he was in this movie, and then it came up, and I'm like, oh, hey, yeah. Because he looks literally just... I think this was probably like a year after Clueless.
Oh, it was like right after.
They still look the same,
Yeah, what's crazy about the whole thing with Skeet and Neve, so you got to think that, like, I believe, and not that I would know this because I wasn't, I was alive in this time, but I mean, I was a child, so I'm not going to remember this.
Not to cut you off, but I just thought about this. So if they did Scream together, and that was what it was, and then they did this movie together... I don't know how movies, like, really work. Like, could they have, like, shot Scream first, or was this something, or was this kind of, like, intertwined where...
Yeah, I'll tell you how that works.
Okay.
So, because...
I just thought about it, because I just was like, okay.
Listen to my Scream episode. Shout out. But, one of my earlier episodes. But, the way it was is that, famously, this was, Scream was shot... at the beginning of 1996 in January-ish or something like that. So they probably already had the craft in the can by the time they were shooting this. Or by the time that Scream was coming out, this had already been shot pretty much. So
you would say maybe this...
This was probably shot in 1995 sometime.
I was just about to say that, yes.
Yeah, so probably literally like...
where Scream was going in 1996.
Exactly. So it was probably...
But it was like right after. Right. They were doing 95, 96, they were...
Yeah, exactly. So they were probably shooting Scream in 1996 in the beginning. They had already probably shot The Craft in 95 sometime.
Okay.
And, that's how that works. I wasn't able to find, like, what dates they actually shot this during, but... generally, that's what I would think. A funny one that you may not know, and I think it was Urban Legend I talked about it on, or it was that or Jawbreaker. I don't remember which, but you know how Rebecca Gayheart is in... Also, Rebecca Gayheart just comes up in my podcasts as well, but because I love her. But so the Urban Legend movie was shot after Jawbreaker, but it came out before Jawbreaker, which is crazy.
So it was shot after Jawbreaker, but it came out before Jawbreaker.
Yep. So how that worked was that spring of 98 is when they did Jawbreaker. That's when they shot it in LA. Right. And then in April of 19...
so you that was your first episode.
I know, right? It really is. I know, but like, but then in August of April of 98, that's when they shot the Urban Legend in Canada. And that movie came out in literally September of 98. Huh. Oh my God. The pre-production of that, the post-production of that is just like, they just had to go, because they were shooting for a time in, the fall time to release it. So I was like, damn, that's great. But that's why, like, for example, Rebecca Gayhart's hair in Jawbreaker isn't her normal hair that she had. Oh. So they straightened her shit for Jawbreaker, like, every fucking morning or whatever.
That makes sense because she's curly-haired.
She has curly-haired, right. And she doesn't have it as much now, but, like, yeah. And then in Urban Legend, if you listen to my episode on it, because it came from the documentary that they have on the Blu-ray, the Scream Factory Blu-ray, there were hair conversations that they had with her, because she pretty much had to tell them, like, listen, like, they didn't want her to have her curly hair because they thought it would give away stuff at the end. You still haven't seen this movie, so, like, I can't just tell you unless I spoil it. But anyway, they didn't want it to give away stuff. And anyway, but it really doesn't. And she had to remind them, like, well, I, won't be able to really be on set for, like, a good hour and a half or 2 hours because you're going to have to, like, straighten my hair. So that kind of gave them the point of, like, oh, maybe we'll just let you keep your hair then. And they did. So.
They straightened it for Jawbreaker.
And they straightened it for Jawbreaker. So probably what's funny is that she probably knew that after having done that, since she just did that movie, like, right before. So she probably was like, well, I mean, if you just let me keep my hair as it normally is and have me not sit in a seat for 2 hours straightening it, so it's a whole thing. We're going to get Sarah to watch Jawbreaker at some point. I don't know when. Or no, she's going to watch Urban Legend at some point. I don't know when.
Watch Jawbreaker.
I'm going to make it happen maybe after the pod. But I'm looking real quick. I do not know when they shot this goddamn movie. I would say it was in 1995, somewhere in there. That's what happened with that. But yeah, I mean, and then I guess we could also talk about just like some of the legacy of this movie as well, because there is a little bit of that. It's very much a movie that people kind of have this idea about or whatever. It has this fan base of people and it has social media presence and all of that, which is wonderful and fun. But I think this movie really, I don't know, I will say some stuff about it where I'm like, ooh, some of this doesn't always work anymore. And I will touch on this because I think it's important to touch on. I think with the treatment of this movie in particular, I think is not one that is, it is not a movie about sisterhood whatsoever. I don't know if people sometimes think that it is, but it really isn't. Generally, it's just that this girl who comes from a really bad situation is leeching off of this other girl who's in a, emotionally unstable situation in a way. And that's what that whole thing is. There's really not a whole lot of sisterhood going on except like, oh, hey, I guess we'll like be friends with you so we can get what we want. But really, Nancy's the major villain of the movie, and she's using Sarah to get what she wants. And then when Sarah's like, hey, no, I don't want to do this anymore, I think we've gone too far, they kind of throw her aside, but then they get theirs in the end. But anyway, so I think there's that. This movie's not a whole lot about sisterhood, I don't think. I also think just the treatment of, like I said, I think Rochelle's storyline, it's interesting that they changed it to be racism after they cast Rachel True. I think Rachel True's a perfectly good actress in this. The treatment of her after this film is not the best. And what I mean by that is that I think it's because racism as just a construct in general in our society is so ingrained in our history and ingrained in our systems, and it's a systematic global issue that's going on and everything like that. Just because you torture racist Marsha Brady, it's not going to cure racism, obviously, which we don't think it is, I guess. But, anyway, I think everyone in this movie gets what they deserve generally for being pieces of shit. But I will say after the fact, so for example, like just some of the ways, like even on Amazon, for example, saying like, it's been on Amazon and AMC Plus sometimes, and you can watch it and everything. And even on there, like, I saw under the supporting characters or the supporting actors was Rachel True. And I was like, that's fucked up. She's one of the lead actresses. Yeah. But on Amazon is being shady and calling her a supporting actress. She's not a supporting actress. She's a lead actress in this. These 4 girls are leads.
They're the 4 people.
They're the 4 people who this story is about. Right. So for some of these streaming services to kind of especially have that, again, maybe, I don't know. It's just that kind of a thing. her not being invited to some of the conventions in the past.
Yeah, I read that, yeah.
Which is bullshit, because even she has said, like, yo, like, I would absolutely do that. It's not like she's doing a whole lot else. It's not like she has some TV show she's on or whatever.
Right.
Absolutely, she could be doing this, but for her to be left out of that is completely fucked up.
I also read that she was, I think when she shot this, she was like almost 30.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the rest of the people were more teenage age.
I
20s
argue with that,
I
but
don't
yeah.
think teenage age. But,
they were younger than her.
Like younger, but they were like, in their like early 20s, and she was old.
She was older. And then people even, like, I think her agents even were kind of like, you know, we'll try and whatever and all that. But she still looks good. I mean, shit, she was
I mean, I didn't think that she didn't look like a high school.
Oh, no, I think they all looked.
They all looked that they were,
They all looked like they're in their 20s, but with what we were doing, it's not like she looked super older than them, the way I look at it. But, yeah, just some of her treatment, I think, is just been
there's actors out there that, like, probably do look older, and it's like, that probably wouldn't be the smartest to cast, but, like, then there's people that just look younger. And
yeah.
They can get away with it.
They can get away with it, and they did. So, you know, but I think her treatment after the fact has just been really fucked up, because I absolutely think, like, Rachel True would be great at a horror convention, and there's no excuse for not inviting her when you're having people from the craft. That would be like, oh, we're just going to leave off fucking, I don't know. We're just going to leave off, like, this integral person from Scream. That would be like something being like, oh, we're just not going to have, like, fucking, I don't know, like Jamie Kennedy or something. I don't know. Like, just somebody who you're like, obviously all of them came together with horror conventions for Scream 5. A lot of the horror conventions were having all of these casts except for Rose McGowan, but everybody else was going to the same conventions to help promote this movie and all that kind of see the fandom. She herself isn't all that interested in Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
So she would not do these conventions.
I didn't know if she was like that or she was problematic. I didn't know.
I think it's more so that she just isn't a big, huge fan of the Scream stuff necessarily because of the whole Weinstein thing.
True, that's understandable.
Because she was very much a big part of that whole thing with Harvey Weinstein. So she has the whole documentary Citizen Rose and, you know, whatever. And she herself is like living in Mexico and, you know, but apparently she's going to a horror convention in New Jersey, apparently. So that's kind of interesting. But I'm just like, I don't know. I get it, though. She's been through some shit. I like you, Rose, for the most part. I was just thinking about this. I was just like, I feel like I would meet her, but I would be like, what kind of Rose would I get if I met her, though? Yeah. You know, I'm like, am I going to get like, look, what am I going to get? I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, but that would be like somebody being like, oh, hey, like, that would kind of be like if Rose was like absolutely down to go to these conventions, just being like, like, you know, we're just not going to invite her.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if she was willing and ready to go, obviously she herself isn't, but that would literally be like saying like, you know, let's just leave off Rose McGowan because of this. Not because she doesn't want to be in it, but in this case, it's like, oh no, all three of those actresses have gone to horror conventions to talk about the craft. And then Rachel True was left off of it, which is really fucking stupid, but it just makes no sense.
If their schedules can't allow it, understandable.
That's different.
If you're just like blatantly not going, hey,
yeah, right,
we're going to do that, then that's a problem.
And especially when she has said something about it, where she's like, yeah, I never got a call about anything. I'm not doing anything that would not allow me to do it. You can make, and this is no shade to Neve Campbell, but you can make Neve Campbell work for most of these things, but you can't fucking.
Well, also too is I know I've seen her in other stuff, but like she isn't that. I don't want to sound mean, but it's not like she's in a bunch of stuff where like
True.
It's like that. But like she also like.
But she was also in something where people would come see her.
You know that she's known for being in that movie.
Exactly.
Like she's in the movie.
Like people would come to that for Fairuza
Balk. I would say Breckin,
you know?
Meyer is a supporting character.
Yes.
Not him,
absolutely.
Not
Are you kidding? Yes. Or even Chris. Yeah. He's more of a supporting character than she is.
Yeah.
That's some bullshit. Right, we're getting off on it, but I'm just saying because it's true. Yeah. Like, you make a good point. Christine Taylor is more of a supporting character. Yep. What are you talking about? Anyway. Yeah, it pisses me off because I'm just like, she doesn't deserve that.
It's messed up.
It doesn't deserve that. And plus also, like, anyway. But again, other podcasts have talked about it too. I wanted to make sure I talked about it too because I'm just like, this is one of those things. And then also just like the fact of this movie, again, some of the stuff works, some of it doesn't. It all depends. But Without further ado, though, I think we've talked enough about production history and legacy and all that stuff. Oh, speaking of legacy, wait a minute, before we move into a pod. Oh, God, Jesus.
Hold up.
Yeah. So, dear listeners, as you may or may not know, I have watched The Craft Legacy and Black Christmas 2019 and all of that stuff. And my sister here has as well. She has watched The Craft Legacy. Mm-hmm. It happened. Now, I will say first and foremost with that movie, I really understand. That is not a movie that is targeted to me. Okay? It's not targeted to Sarah over here. It's not targeted to most people who are in their 30s at this point. I get that. However, that movie, no. I watched it. I think God did not pay money for it because I would have been pissed if I did. I just don't think...
I may have.
You might have, and I feel so bad for you.
Me and my best friend Barbie, shout out
Barbie.
Which we always shout out. So I think me and her watched it. So I think she was here. I think she came here and we watched it at my house. And it was like fine. And then we're like, yeah, like all in all, we're like, nah.
No, girl. It just was like, I understand.
Because who was supposed to be like, okay, I don't want to say.
I don't think there was supposed to be a Nancy.
No. But it wasn't like somebody like a kid.
Yes. So, spoiler alert for The Craft Legacy, if you care. But, so, girl comes to town with her mom, Michelle Monaghan, and they're moving in with David Duchovny and his 3 children, or whatever the hell. And so, like, they go through, so, like, the girl, I don't even fucking remember her name, she meets up with these girls. One is Pamela Adlin's daughter, the other one is a trans girl, and the other one is the black character of the film. And so they meet up with her, and, you know, they're all like, oh, we're, like, kind of into witchcraft, blah, blah, blah. Come to find out, David Duchovny is like an evil warlock who is like battling against these witches or whatever. They put this kid who made fun of the main girl. They made fun of her for having her period in class, and they put a spell on him to make him more socially aware and more, quote, woke or whatever. And then he comes out as bisexual to them and like all this stuff, and said that he actually fooled around with one of her stepbrothers, which he did, which was one of his really good friends, and all that kind of stuff. And then come to find out, we find out that the main girl actually was adopted and is the kid of Nancy Downs, Fairuza Balk. And Fairuza Balk needed a paycheck that week or month or whatever. And she comes back at the end of it because the main girl goes to the institution to go see her. And that's the end of The Craft Legacy. So some of the stuff...
Did you ever see Fairuza Balk?
Yes, you see her at the end.
See,
that's it. Like, it's so dumb.
She needed a paycheck.
She needed a paycheck, dude. So listen, I know I'm not the target audience. I don't think it really works that well.
No, it was not.
It was not good. And that's a Blumhouse thing. Listen, like...
It
shouldn't have been made.
It shouldn't have been made.
No shade to Zoe Lister-Jones. Listen, she was a New Girl. Did you know that? Because you're a New Girl person,
yeah,
right?
I do.
She's like a supporting actress on there. She comes in every so often. But she's the one who wrote and directed the Craft Legacy.
Who was she in New Girl?
We're going to find out right here on the pod today. Zoe
New
Lister-Jones.
Girl is a very good show.
Yeah, Sarah loves New Girl. She also loves The Middle as well, for any Middle fans out there.
Yeah, The Middle is very good too. 2 completely different shows, but...
Yes.
It's also very good.
She was on that television show. She was Fawn Moscato. She was in 5 episodes. Okay, hold on. Right here.
I think I know who it is.
That girl.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't watch New Girl. I don't care. But anyway, she was in there, so that's the bitch. I'm sorry. That was the girl who wrote and directed Craft Legacy.
Oh, okay.
So no shade to you, girl, but no, that movie fell apart.
She was also in she was in a TV show.
She probably was, yeah.
Life in Pieces or something.
Well, I'm on her Wikipedia right now. I'll tell you real quick. Yes, she was.
I started watching it, but I didn't finish that.
She was, yeah. But anyway, yeah, exactly. But yeah, so you don't worry about The Craft Legacy. It's not that good.
Don't watch
that. It's not made.
If you're gonna watch The Craft, watch the 1996.
Just watch that one. Again, with all its problems it has, you know, whatever. Like, just watch that. It has more style, and it's
kind of the equivalent of. And we were going to go back to this. When we did Days of Confused, and then there was Everybody Wants Some, that the director did the same movie.
Sure.
Well, he didn't do the same movie. I shouldn't say that. But
he did. He did a continuation,
and it just was not good.
Yeah,
it kind of feels the same.
Yeah. Oh, fun fact! I did try to watch Everybody Wants Some after we did that podcast because it was on Showtime. I made it 10 minutes in, and I texted Sarah, and I was like, "I'm turning this off. I can't do it. No. But
I did watch it all, but it just wasn't.
I'll give you that. The Craft is not the most amazing movie.
It had two cute guys in there.
The Craft is not an amazing movie necessarily, but that comparison, The Craft Legacy is worse because I'm like, why did we do that? Yeah. Part of it works where I'm like, okay, the girls aren't there's no infighting necessarily. They themselves actually bind themselves after they accidentally kill Timmy, or they think they killed Timmy, or whatever. They think that they drove him to kill himself, but they really didn't. He was killed by David Duchovny. But,
because he was cray-cray.
Because he was cray-cray and he was the villain, but so he was the major villain of that story, but I was just it falls apart. You don't get to know any of the girls really at all, except for the main girl, and it just was I
hear you.
Girl, I just was not here for it, but I was not the main audience. But hey, if anybody's listening who's Gen Z or whatever, tell me what you think about that movie, I guess. Without further ado, though, we are going to move into a bit of a plot summary of The Craft to talk about that. Now, we open our movie on our Columbia Pictures movie, opening. And we are introduced to our three girls doing it's not seance, but it's more just them having their little crystal balls and they're outside under this little gazebo thing or something, some shit. And they're
which I don't know if I've ever remembered that. I put it on.
I know, right? What? I was like, wait a minute. I kind of remember that. Actually, I feel you on that because I was like, I don't remember this part, but I guess it's there. And they're trying to invoke something or whatever. And they're chanting. So we have our girls. We have Bonnie, played by Neve Campbell. We have Rochelle, played by Rachel True. And we have our main villain of this piece, Nancy, played by Fairuza Balk. And so then we go into the super 90s, cutaway of, flames, and, we're in the sky now. Yeah. And it's this Craft. Yeah. And you have the people's names all coming through and everything. So you're wondering, why the hell are we in the sky? What the fuck? But the reason we're in the sky is because our actual main character, Sarah, is on a plane with her family. Her stepmom, Jenny, who I don't know who's played Jenny, actually, but, some lady. And then her dad, Cliff DeYoung. Fun fact, Cliff DeYoung is actually in the sequel to Rocky Horror Picture Show called Shock Treatment. He plays Brad in that. So that was kind of fun from the 80s.
Just so we can start this, obviously, I do like this movie. It's not one of my favorites, but I've watched it, and I've watched it a few times.
Sure.
But obviously I've liked it because her name is Sarah, and she does spell it the correct way, Sarah. Because you'll get into it, but they move into this new house, they move into the new town, and start new school and stuff like that. So they have boxes, and it's Sarah's room, and it's Sarah H. So I would always like that because it's my name.
I would also like to say that for any Sarahs who don't spell their name with an H, the views of Sarah Heidelberg do not represent what the Cult Cinema Circle represents. So we're not coming for you. We're just saying she always has this preference. The same thing for me with Jessie, Jesse. I don't spell my name with a Jesse, so I don't like when people do that to me sometimes. So I can understand, I like when people spell it with Jesse. I'm like, yeah. A shout out to Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I guess. That's fun, because the guy's name is Jesse. But anyway, so they're on a plane, and they're flying from San Francisco to Los Angeles, where they're moving. They're in the cab. It's raining, which is it only happens in LA so much, I guess, to set the ambiance. And so they're moving into this big old Spanish-style mansion, pretty much, which I'm just like, what the fuck does this guy do for a living? Right. Okay. It's
really sad, yeah.
Apparently shitty inside because the roof is leaking, so that sucks.
So, backtrack just a minute. So, sure. I was watching it, and I know this comes into play later on in the movie, almost kind of throughout, I should say, sorry. Right. But there's another part of it in the end of the movie. So, I didn't realize this in the beginning. But when they're driving, they're in the taxi, put the bags in the car, they're in the taxi driving to the new house, And I think they're, like, on the drive up, or there's trees, and then she sees a snake.
Yes, she does.
Now, I guess maybe I'll be enlightened on this episode, but, like, I don't know if there's, like, a fear. I mean, obviously, that can be a legit fear. Mm-hmm. But, like, I think she's seen it, and I don't know if it was actually there.
I don't know.
Or what the deal was with that, but
yeah,
I just kind of, like, didn't realize it at first. I just thought, like, oh, hey, they're moving to their new house, they're driving there. And, like, she saw a snake, and she kind of, like, jumped back a little bit. Like, it wasn't to get her. It was just, like, she saw it through the window.
Yeah.
Of the cab.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the snake imagery throughout is. It just plays into the, like, it plays throughout the movie. It does. It does. I know that one of the things is that she would say there'd be times where she would, like, have these bad nightmares. Yeah. And there'd be bugs and snakes everywhere. Yeah. And they wouldn't go away. So maybe that was it.
Maybe.
But yeah. To speak of snakes, so we see that, like, Sarah goes to see her new room. She puts down a picture of her mother, who we find out is passed away. We later find out she passed away having Sarah.
Yeah.
So she then comes down and she's to the little living area near the front door. She's getting something to maybe put up in her room, and we then see this street preacher who is just a houseless person who has a snake in his hands.
Just like, okay, who does that?
I don't know.
Who just comes into somebody's freaking house
with a snake
and comes in with a snake and just comes out like completely unannounced? Like,
yeah.
If somebody did that, I
would.
I mean, I don't own anything like that, but like I would take whatever close next. Something I could find to, like, take them down, which I don't have.
Right, because it's just freaky. You're just like... And also, when we just did this whole drive, I'm like, okay, I get that, like, he lives on the street or, like, he's homeless. But, like, I was just like...
It was awkward.
He just, like, came up and, like, he had to go all that way. I was like, okay, like, all right, whatever. Anyway, so with snakes and everything.
And Dad shoos him away.
And then the snake is still there. And then he's just like, you know, whatever.
And Dad's like, get away.
Get away. But then...
I think he has, like, what's that called? Like a fireplace?
A fire poker.
Yeah.
Yeah, fireplace poker. But anyway, so then we are moving on to...
I don't have a fire poker in my house.
We do not have a fireplace in this home. Okay, listen. But anyway, so we're not that fancy here. But we then see her dad drives her to school at St. Bernard's Academy, which is a Catholic school, I believe. So...
And I think he's trying to say that, like, she doesn't have to start.
She doesn't have to start, and she's just like...
We don't know what time this is. Like, we don't know if this is middle school year or what.
This is high school year.
Like, no, not middle school. Like, middle of the school year.
Oh, yeah.
Or not. I don't know.
Right.
But anyway, nonetheless, he drops her off.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, time in this movie doesn't really make sense a whole lot. But anyway, so yeah, I think you're right. And so she's like, I can't just...
So how you know if it's...
Yeah, unless somebody literally tells
winter time or, you know.
Yeah. But, so we're just like, okay. But she's like, I can't just sit home and, you know, watch daytime TV forever. He's like, I mean, I could. And I'm just like...
And also, I could
not. Anyway, right, but seriously.
I feel the sentiments of her dad.
Exactly. But she goes into school. She's not dressed up in her uniform, even though he's like, oh, we can wait till you get a uniform, I guess, or whatever. But she's just like, whatever, screw it, I'll do this. Then we, like, see her walking into school. She's looking up at the Jesus that's, like, above the her getting into school. And then we are introduced to our three girls again, because then we see them walking down the hallway. We see that Mitt, Breckin Meyer, and I think his friend, and I think maybe Skeet Ulrich is there too, where they say, like, you know, oh, scary bitch alert, and then Nancy just, like, looks at them and, like, stares at her.
I think it's the three guys.
Yeah, but then we see that Bonnie is like, you know, oh, well, the almanac says this. She's, like, you know, dressed up, you know, very much like she just has these layers on, and she's just, like, looking all forlorn and, like, just unkempt or whatever. But she's reading this goddamn almanac, which I'm just like, okay, cool. And then they're saying maybe it's our fourth. Be like, well, we don't need a fourth. Like, you know, we don't need that at all. And then, like, Nancy has, like, a noose in her locker that she pulls out.
I never noticed that. Weird. I was like, okay.
Okay, great. So then, and then Nancy's all like, you know, maybe she can be our fourth. And it's like this, like, kind of stocky looking woman in, like, a security guard outfit, and be like, oh, okay, whatever. I don't know how this movie doesn't get very sapphic at all for the lesbians, but maybe there's some people who connect with that part or connect with something with there because it's a female movie. I don't know. But anyway, so we then see them in, I believe it is science class or something. So like, cause Sarah's there and she's just like, you know, hanging out. There's something before that. We're going to dick to her. Maybe not. No, I don't think so. I think it was like they're in science class and then they meet each other. This is the first time because she has to find a lab group. Mm-hmm. And then they're just, so Nancy's just rude to her. Yeah. And she's just like, oh, okay, I guess, whatever.
And then Bonnie is like very soft-spoken, very doormatish, I would think, almost. What you would call that. Mm-hmm.
Because she's hiding herself away.
Yeah. And she's like, Nancy gives her a look, and she's like, "Okay, fuck me then."
But even
then
she's
she
like,
says something she can't hear.
She's like, "No, you can sit here," and then she's like,
hear it,
"It's too late, I guess." And then we are over at lunch. I guess.
Oh, I think we moved across this too soon.
Oh, did we? Wait a minute.
Well, would they show Skeet? Like, Skeet Ulrich.
Yes.
Not gonna lie, he is cute. Well, he's cute either way. He's very handsome person, and he's only got better with age, I think. But I thought, personally, I just didn't really like his hair in this movie.
Yeah.
I think he looked better in Scream with the long.
Really?
The long.
Even it being greasy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You heard it here first, everybody.
But yeah, Skeet. We do stand Skeet Ulrich here, and
Sarah stands him. I don't stand him that much. I like him though.
Yeah, can't say he's not cute.
He was cuter when he was younger.
Yeah, so. I think he's still very attractive for being in his 50s.
Yeah,
whatever.
I wasn't the biggest fan of the new Scream movie, and he's partly why, but whatever, it's fine. Moving on.
He was in it for flashbacks.
I know, but still, I was just like, okay, great.
Anyway, so sorry, we jumped over that Skeet Ulrich is in this movie. Like, come on now.
We do. But I think we're at lunch now, I believe. Either that or we're in French class. Are we in French class yet? I think we're in French class, actually.
Yeah.
Because then what ends up happening is, we are in French class because Breckin Meyer doesn't know how to speak French, even though he's in French.
Right.
And then but he's in there, Skeet's in there, and then Bonnie and Sarah are in there. And so this is after, I think this is after Nancy was a dick to her, and then they're in French class. Right. And this is where Breckenmeyer, this is where Mitt calls Sarah a snail trail, which I just think is rude because she says something in French about him. The
teacher's only speaking French. He's not speaking
and he doesn't know what he's
English
saying.
And French, he doesn't know. And then she must know, obviously. So then she says something, probably some insult. I don't know what it is because I don't speak French.
I don't either.
So I don't know. And they're like, shouldn't we be speaking Mexican?
Oh,
you see that in there. And I'm
Lord.
like, really, guys?
And at least Chris was like, that's Spanish, you dumbass.
Yeah. Stupid. But then that's when he says that snail comment.
Snail trail. I'm just like, that's just gross, but okay, whatever. But then you see that Bonnie sees Sarah and she's levitating a pencil all by herself. And
she looks over at her and she sees that she's concentrating on it.
Yes.
And then it's usually you put a pencil down and it's gonna go boop.
No, but she's able to levitate it. Yeah. And then she does this and then it makes her break her concentration, and then the pencil falls down. But then
then she's like,
"Oh, bitch, this is the person."
Oh, okay.
Okay,
she got something.
She got something. She is somebody who we need to be aware of, if anything. Then we're actually at lunch, I believe, because then we see that Chris actually comes up to Sarah and is like, "Hi, I'm Chris. I'm Sarah."
Yeah, she's wearing that striped dress.
She's wearing the striped dress,
yeah. And the girls are sitting.
They're sitting
against the wall, wherever it is,
and be like, "Yeah, everyone. I've had my guards up because everyone's just been kind of rude to me."
Yep.
All this, and so then they talk about those girls. She says don't stare at them, but the girls behind you are the ones who were kind of rude to me. And then he calls these girls who he sees the bitches of Eastwick. Yeah. He says, "Slut." Okay. The other one has burns. He's then the other one has burns all over her. I don't speak from personal experience, but I've had other people who've said that is. And then he mentions nothing about Rachel True, which is a whole other thing. But anyway,
which is shocking because nobody
talks about her at all. But Well, he says something kind of rude later, but anyway. So that happens, and then says, oh, well, what are you doing after school? Be like, oh, nothing really. Be like, oh, I'm going to have football practice. Like, you can come watch if you want to. And be like, oh, that's so tempting.
Right.
Thank you. But she does go, after this scene, she goes and is kind of watching him a little bit. Because she kind of likes him, although I don't understand why you'd like him, because he literally just said this girl was a major slut, and I don't know about you, I don't want to be with somebody who is saying that, but anyway, oh well. So then, Sarah's watching the game, and then the three girls walk up, and they're just like, Rochelle says, Nancy's sorry about what, happened in biology and all that, and she's like, it's okay, whatever, like, she's mean to everybody, don't take it personal. And then, Nancy's all like... So it's weird that, like, Nancy has some of the girls talk for her. Maybe, kind of, sort of. Because she's their leader, quote unquote.
There is something I did read that... Because he's doing football practice, and there's obviously, like, football jerseys have numbers. And there is a number he's wearing the number 86.
Oh, okay.
Which will come back into play. Well, I don't want to say it comes back into play later, but... Once you get to the point, I'll return.
I'll love to hear about it because I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, okay. So, but yeah, so
I
then,
just read it on there. I was like,
okay. But anyway, so you have that, and then Nancy's like, do you want to like hang out, like whatever? And she's like, I have to get you home, and she's like, well, make something up. Like Rochelle's ditching practice, like come with us.
Because Rochelle swims.
Rochelle does swim, yes. So then,
swim team, yeah.
Exactly, yes. And so then she also says, Nancy says, like, he's a jerk. Like, he,
she's like trying to warn her.
She's trying to warn her. And she says he spreads disease. Like, I speak from personal experience. He's a jerk. And she even says, she's like, go, Chris, go for the long pass. And then it makes him, like, fall. Yeah. Which is funny. And then they walk away and they're like going and walking. They're just talking to each other, walking down the street, being like, so where'd you move from? Oh, I moved from San Francisco. Like, they talk about how, like, well, it sucks here too. It'll be like, I know you need a car here and all that kind of stuff and yada yada. And then Nancy points out, like, oh, what's this for? Because I think she has a wristwatch. Mm-hmm. Sarah has a wristwatch. And she says, oh, I slit my wrists. And she's like, sorry. Or she even says sorry, but Fairuza Balk is not Canadian. So I think that's kind of funny. But anyway. Oh, some of this is, I don't think it mostly is Canadian, but I was thinking of somebody else says something really weird. But anyway. But I will say one of the things that doesn't always work. Also, if anybody ever needs trigger warnings for this stuff, trigger warning for like suicide attempts and like self-harm and also just like sexual assault a little bit, kind of. Yeah. So in case you need that, we haven't gotten too deep, but
it's definitely
it's in there.
It's in there, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway,
not too graphic, but just
still
as a. Like,
can you also believe too?
Trigger warning.
Yes, in case you need it. But I will also say, it's crazy to me that Andrew Fleming, I believe, wanted this movie to be PG-13.
Yeah?
Yes, he wanted it to be PG-13, but because of the whole thing of it's about witchcraft, it gets dark, all that stuff, it got turned to R. Which he kind of wishes, he's said before that he kind of wishes that he was able to go a little further with it. Mm-hmm. But because he didn't, because he planned this to be PG-13, it's just interesting how that kind of works. And I'll get to that in a bit, about another scene. But anyway, so yeah, one of the things of this is that Bonnie says, you even did it the right way. That's just gross to say when it comes to that, because what she's referring to is that, like, the way you do it horizontal won't actually technically kill you. It's to do the vertical is all that. Oh. It's just kind of gross to say that. And, again, so if you have that trigger or anything like that, you do see the mark on her wrist or whatever. Yeah. And, but yeah, just saying that is just like not great. I think other pods have also talked about it a little bit too. So yeah, I just feel weird about it because I'm just like, oh, you shouldn't say that. And even Rochelle says like, Bonnie, like what's the right way? What do you mean by that? And she's like, shut up, Rochelle. And they're walking into this occult shop.
Yeah.
That is, but this kind of gives me a little bit of like Bonnie herself maybe has, because we find out, okay, like, so Rachel or, Sarah, she slit her wrist, and we then find out that she did attempt to kill herself. we also maybe get that, like, perhaps Bonnie has had those thoughts before. So maybe that's why she said that. Maybe? I don't know. Because I don't really know much about Rochelle and Nancy's kind of thoughts about that. But I could tell with Bonnie, I'm like, oh, maybe she had thought of that before. Maybe that's why she said something like that. And then she says, like, well, just shut up, Rochelle. Like, don't worry about it. But, you know, regardless of that, being the occult shop that is run by Lirio, played by Assumpta Serna. And so even before this, though, we see that they're like, oh, I don't have any money. Like, how are we supposed to go shopping? And it's a 5-finger discount. So they're like, okay, great. I'm in with a bunch of thieves.
Right.
All right, cool. But they're like, oh, you know, well, stealing is a part of nature. Like, you know, big animals steal from little animals and all this. Be like, yeah, but they steal for survival. Like, we don't need this stuff. And so, like, they're just kind of walking around this occult shop and everything. Sarah almost goes into the back, and then Lirio stops her, be like, that's not for you. Be like, oh, sorry. And be like, you know, she says, the watch, like, it's your mother's, isn't it? Be like, yeah, it is. And then Lirio then asks, like, are you going to pay for that? She's like, yeah, I will, fine. So then she gives her $20 for whatever the fucking book she has is, or whatever she's buying. And so she apparently does have some sort of money, a little bit, but she gives that, and then the girls leave. And they're just talking. So Lirio's talking a little bit about, you know, I don't really get in, you know, Sarah's like, I don't really get into all this stuff and whatever. If you're like, well, maybe you're a natural witch. Maybe it just comes from within. She's like, maybe. I don't really think much of it, whatever. I like her little line where she says, you know how to use candles? And she's like, yeah, you light the wick, right? And then she's like, oh no, that's like the book, which is called The Craft.
Right.
But you have that. But anyway. So then after they leave the store, they then are walking on, I believe, Hollywood Boulevard or something like that, where there's a bunch of people who are, you know, homeless folks. And they even say just like, hey, just walk straight. Like, don't worry about it. You know, just walk straight and keep yourself, because otherwise,
at this point it's dark.
Because it's dark, and these 4 girls are just walking in Hollywood, or wherever they're at. So we then come across the guy from earlier with the snake, because Sarah's just like, oh, I don't have any money, blah, 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 whatever. And then he's just like, hey, I know you. And then she's just freaked out because she's like, what the fuck? Like, this guy is like weird. He says, I had a dream about you. In my dream, you were dead. And she's just freaked out because she's supposed to be a teenager. So she's like, yeah, if some guy on the street was just saying this, obviously he must have some sort of mental health stuff going on or whatever. Something's going on with him. But, you know, he's just like, you need to listen to me, da-da-da. There was like a street preacher guy. There was like a guy for Jesus, which was weird. But she's like, Jesus, like, get away from me. Like, God. So then she's running across the street trying to get away from this guy. And the girls are on the other side of the street now. They all look at him, and then after that, that's when he gets hit by a car. And that car runs over his head. We don't see the graphic of it, but it does. So, fair to say he's dead.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then they're like, come on, let's get out of here. And so they run out to the middle of these, they're not woods, they're kind of woods, but you can still see the city from them, so they're not like in the wilderness or anything. But like, they run over to that, and they're just like, oh my God, like we made that, you know, I think we made that happen. Like, I didn't think the car was going to hit him, but I kind of wanted it to. Like, were you thinking the same thing? I will say this right now. They sit on this nasty couch stuff. And I was like, girl, like, you're going to have to take multiple showers.
Right.
Like, I mean, I get it. Because then in the background, you kind of see, like, there's people with, like, a fire and, like, a barrel and whatever. So you're assuming that there's people who are just, like, living outside, obviously. Just a thing of LA that you see. But, you know, but it's one of these things where it's like, you know, I was like, girl, you are, like, you're going to get diseases from sitting on this stuff. Because it's just, like, out in the middle of gross. But this is where they're talking about, like, you know, like, this is real, though. Like, this is something, like, we all made this happen. It's a coincidence. Maybe it could have been or whatever. But then this is where we get the introduction to, like, what they believe. Because really, they think, okay, well, this shit's real now. Like, combined, we can make stuff happen, right? So that's cool. Like, Rochelle asked, like, where did you learn it? She's like, I don't know. And this is where Sarah talks about, like, you know, sometimes it gets, like, really messed up. Like, at times it's like, I want it to be, you know, I'll want it to rain and then a pipe will burst in my room and it'll get flooded. Or I'll want it to be quiet for, you know, a minute and, like, I wish for it, and then I'll go deaf for, like, 2 days or whatever. So, in this case, all that And then we get introduced to the idea of what Manon is, because Rachel True, Rochelle, she says, maybe he'll really listen to us. I mean, it's Manon. As we already said, Manon is not real, so no worries about that. But how it's explained to us by Nancy is that it's not the devil, it's not God. The way it's explained is that if the devil and God were playing football, Manon would be the field that they're playing on. Mm-hmm. It would be the sun that shone down on them. It would be this. She's like, it's nature, I guess, right? Okay, fair. And so this is also where Nancy says he takes all the stuff that's bad in your life and makes it all go away and makes it all better. That's what she says. And even Sarah's like, there's nothing that makes just everything better. It's not that. And this is where Sarah's like, okay, now I'm getting like weirded out and I'm getting kind of like creeped out by this all. So I'm going to leave because I got to go. Because I think she was also invited earlier by Chris to go on a date. So I guess she's going to go to that now. Right. But even Rochelle says, like she'll be back. She'll be back. But then we move into the date with Chris. So this is where they are on top of a building. I guess that Laura Lizzie, played by Christine Taylor, Marsha Brady, is also there with like her date, I guess, is also on this roof. But it's her, so it's Sarah and it's Chris. And they're talking about heads or whatever. Like, I don't know why you hang out with those girls with the weird heads. Yeah. This is the rude comment that he makes about Rachel True's character because he says mammoth head, which is just rude. And it's referring to like her hair texture, which is just rude. Okay. So anyway, we'll get into it with another scene. But anyway, you have this, and then he tries kissing her, which she's not in a point to be in any relationship with anybody because she has some baggage that she has not worked through, it seems like, which fair, your mom died, you yourself already have some issues because you even share that you have tried to kill yourself before. So like, you got some underlying things going on and whatever. So like, she's not in a position to really be with anybody at this point, but Chris wants to be with her. She politely does decline. And she even says like, are you mad? And he's like, no, I'm not mad. And whatever. Now, as a female, how do you think that this kind of went in terms of how that kind of all was a little bit?
At least at this point, he didn't really push it. Like, he just was like, I'm trying to kiss you. She said no. He didn't really fight on it too much. But when that a girl has to say, are you mad? To a guy after that. Because we do know sometimes, and I don't want to, sound like I'm coming off rude. But, like, sometimes guys think with their downstairs head.
Yes.
Not their upstairs head. And, right. So if their downstairs head doesn't get what they want, they're just jerks about it. So... Because
the patriarchy, everybody.
So, a true gentleman-like person, truly gentleman, would have just been like, is it okay if I kiss you?
Yeah.
If they felt that was, like, where, if they were both vibing and all that. And then she's like, yes, like, that would have been, like, really nice. And then...
But that was not what was happening.
That was it. But it's not what happened. And then also to play the fact that if she was like, if she... Let's say she said, yes, you can. But also if he asked that and she said... No.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Maybe another time. Like.
Yeah. And I think she even did do that where she was like, not interested.
Then for him to go and do what he did afterwards.
Yeah.
Then, like, that is not gentlemanlike. And.
Yeah.
But I don't think that a woman, girl, teenage girl, whatever, because really these are high school women. But this goes really for any person, any age, my age now, my age 10 years ago, my age 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You shouldn't, if you are not wanting to do something and you say no, whatever it may be, and you shouldn't have to feel like they wanted to do that. Right. I didn't do it. Are you mad? Like, I know she said it, but like us as women shouldn't have to feel like we say that. We should need to say that because you know what? It's our bodies, and it's not like it's not like it's kind of weird because like when you think of it as a guy, like if a girl tried to kiss a guy, and I'm not trying to sound rude.
Oh no.
But if a girl tried to kiss a guy and he said no.
Right.
Like, I don't know how, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's kind of a weird situation because it's like, It's usually not that way.
And it can be a double standard, too, of like, you know, oh, well, you... And then we get into the fact of, like, they're at school the next day, and then, you know, Sarah's just, like, sitting by herself.
I just don't think... I just don't feel like she's very mad. And he was like, no, but it's like, he fucking lied to her.
Exactly.
Like, of course he was...
He's being a dick. And so this just sets up.
He, like, you know, he thought something was going to come out of it, and he didn't.
Because he invites her to his house, and then she declines. She says, let's go to our house. Right.
Yeah.
So you're just like, no, I think I'm going to just go.
He's like, nobody's home.
Exactly, right. And you're just like,
sir, no.
Sir, no, I don't want to go with you. Sorry. Like, whatever.
Right.
Anyway, so she's at school the next day, and then the three girls come up to be like, hey, hot stuff, how was your date with Chris? Be like, what do you mean? Like, we did nothing.
Right.
And then this is where we find out from Nancy, who's already kind of like, we already can tell that she's going to be the antagonist because of the way she delivers this, but like, she says, like, Chris has been telling everyone that you hooked up. And not only that you hooked up, which you didn't, but you were the lousiest sleigh that he's ever had. And the way she says it is already kind of antagonistic, but she's just like, oh, okay, really? Got it. So she walks over to Chris's locker and she's like, hey, Chris, can I like talk to you for a minute?
Right, like, you know, going over.
And then fucking Breckin Meyer's Mitt, he's all like...
He like gets it like in between her and him.
Ooh,
and he's like, oh, he's not available right now. Like,
pissing the girls off. Ooh, because it's just like, how fucking immature are you?
Right.
Like, really? And she's just like, okay, move out of the way.
Right, so she does that, and then basically, like, she's like, like, fuck, well, she does say that, but basically she's like, you know that's not true.
Yeah.
And then he was like,
please stop begging.
Like, he's like, please stop begging, it's pathetic. Like, looking at her, just giving her, like, a smirk, like, throwing the tables and all that, and then she's like, hey, Chris, fuck you.
Yeah, Chris, fuck you. God. And this just sets up that he is a piece of shit. He's a fuckboy. He's a piece of shit. Yep. Anyway, so there's that.
Like when fuckboys weren't called fuckboys then, but that's what he was.
Yeah, like so this just shows that he's a piece of shit and all that.
And a fuckboy.
Then we move to a memorable part of this movie, which is Rochelle at diving practice.
Yes.
Okay? Because then we'll move into Bonnie after this, but, because then it culminates. But anyway, so then... we move into Rochelle at diving practice. We have been told that she's skipping practice because she's a diver. Mm-hmm. So she's about to dive. We see Laura Lizzie, who we saw tangentially beforehand. She like is smirking when, you know, in the class or whatever, because she was there that night. And she's just like, She's just like, you know, doing this thing of like, go ahead and go do it. To dive. And then so Rochelle's in the middle of her dive, she yells out, Laura Lizzie yells out, shark. Which makes her fuck her stuff up, which she could have been like seriously hurt, by the way. So that is just like really an asshole thing to do. Because when you're diving, you can't dive. If you dive a certain way, you can really fuck your shit up or like almost break your fucking neck. So, you know, anyway. So there's that. And then it just shows like, okay, she's a bitch. And then the next scene is her, they're in the locker room changing after whatever. And this is when Laura is saying, like, you know, oh, there's a pubic hair in my brush. Oh, that's just one of Rochelle's nappy hairs. Like, okay, that's already fucked up anyway.
Right.
So, okay. And we will not be using the term that is in here because I don't want to do that.
Right.
But Rochelle asks, like, what are you doing, Laura? Like, do you think you're funny?
Right. Or like, what do you have against me? Like, what did I ever do?
And this is right, exactly. She says this and she's like, and Laura is like, you really want to know? She's like, yeah, I really want to know. And she says, because I don't like insert here. Okay. And I'm telling you right now, just from what I can figure, especially since he wanted this to be PG-13, I think. I feel like they wanted to use the hard R, but like, or the hard ER, you know, they wanted to use the hard N word, but they didn't. They did it a little different, but it's interesting because Rachel True does talk about that in the horror noir documentary where she feels like now, at least when she looks at something like The Craft, you know, young black girls can watch this and see this. And, you know, for her, at least to have that representation, but also, and people can see her as the representation, right? But it was more interesting because it was supposed to be somebody with an eating disorder. That was her issue she was going to have. And then it got turned. But then what's interesting is that Rachel True even talks about like the racism she dealt with on a daily basis is more of what we have in this, which is something like this scene where you just have somebody say, like, because I don't like your people, or I don't like your whatever, blah, blah, blah. And using terms
which
and
is
things
crazy
of that
because,
sort.
like, I mean, if this is based not on being the 80s, and so, you know, it's not like that. It's based on the 90s. Like, that's just, like, not cool. Like, that is...
It's not. And
like, that is not something that she should have said to her. Like... Yeah,
it's fucked up. It's a point of contention.
If you don't like a person for whatever reason it may be...
Yeah.
Like, you know... But just not to like them because of...
their skin color.
Like, it's just... Like, and that's like...
Yeah.
Her being a lesbian. Like, I don't like you because you... like, you know, like girls or, you know, whatever. Like, that's just being a homophobe. Like,
it's just like...
So, essentially, Laura Lizzie in this movie is a racist.
Yeah, she's a racist. Racist Marsha Brady. You know, all that. It's like
no, it's just like...
Anyway. So, yeah, it just shows that also... Okay, so Chris is a piece of shit for this reason. Laura Lizzie's a piece of shit, too. Okay? So, like... Yep. All right, got it. Okay, cool. So, then you move on to Bonnie. Bonnie is not a piece of shit, apparently. But what a piece of shit is the fact that she has burns all over her body.
I didn't know that. I mean, obviously, it's a very pivotal part in the plot in the sense that, like, that is her... She just feels very shy about it. She's very insecure about it. I mean, it's something to be feel insecure about. But I didn't know, because I don't think it's ever really stated how she
got them.
Or, like, why, you know... Was it, you know, what happened? Like, was she in a house fire? Like, was it
right.
That? But it was apparently an auto accident, is from what I...
Oh, okay.
She was in an auto accident, and it was, I guess it was not... You know, obviously she got out alive, but I guess it left burn scars.
And it happened to her younger and whatever. Because she says that later in the thing, she said she spent half of her life. So this is to assume that she got into an auto accident when she was younger, which maybe, I don't know... perhaps killed her father because she only has a mom. So I don't know. Who knows? It doesn't dive into that, but I kind of wondered that a little bit. But anyway, so she goes to Dr. Desperate Housewife, Brenda Strong. She goes to her and says, oh, it's this experimental procedure that we have, you know, and blah, blah, blah. But pretty much like we're going to be sticking a needle in the back to see what they can do. And so this scene is just like, so Bonnie's sitting down in the operating table and they're taking this needle on this like fucking machine, and it's just like tapping her on her back, but it obviously very much hurts. She was told it was going to hurt.
Well, you know what I just saw like maybe like a month or two ago, like somebody was like talking about this scene, and like, because it has like her face, like where you can see her face, like her, like the agony, and like seeing her like kind of like crying, because it's like, you know,
it hurts.
It's like a hurtful procedure. And apparently they're like, she's laying on an ironing board.
Oh, God.
Because, like, the way it's shaped, I'm like...
It is kind of, but it makes sense. But anyway, so then you just see her kind of scream out, and that was hers.
I'm sure it's very painful.
Yes. And so, okay, so you have Rochelle, you have Sarah, then you have Bonnie. You come back to Sarah while she is in her bed, sleeping, which you then just get her dream that she has, which is her suicide attempt, where you see her cut her wrist. She has a glass of water she's drinking, and then she drops the glass of water, and then the blood's there a little bit too. She just has that like random ass dream. Yeah. We're then moved into Nancy's shit, because we don't really know much about Nancy except she's a goth and whatever. Right. But this is where we find that Nancy is living in a trailer, pretty much. She's walking home in the rain. She lives in a trailer. She lives with her mom, and she lives with her stepfather. Her real dad is not around.
Either one, I don't know if it's a stepfather or... Well, that's what I always gathered. I don't know if it was her stepfather or it was her... like mom's boyfriend. We'll
also talk about that too, because it comes up in the movie. Yeah. But anyway, so it's there, and then you see that like she's just living in poverty, living in squalor. She goes into her room where she's like smoking a cigarette, and then she's like laying on her bed, and the water's just like dripping. Her power also went out, and her parents are, you know, fighting about that. You can't even pay a bill. What are you good for? You know, all this kind of stuff. And you just see that she's living in not great conditions. Yeah. Okay. So there's that. So these are all four of the girls, and this is what they're all dealing with. These are all their issues they're dealing with, and all that stuff. But then they decide, all right, we're all back at school now. I'm pretty sure this happens. They're all back at school, and they're like, oh, hey, we're going on a little field trip, Sarah, you know. And so the nun at the front is like, I'm sorry to interrupt your social hour, Miss Downs. And she's like, sorry, sister. you know? But then they get on a bus to the middle of the countryside from wherever the hell that is. And they all are like Rachel True, Rochelle's looking all cute with her little like sundress, and they're all just like at the back of the bus. And like Nancy is staring daggers at this kid that's like also there.
Yeah, he's like staring at her.
Right, but Rochelle's like being all smiley and nice. This is the iconic scene where they get off of the bus and the driver says, "You girls watch out for those weirdos." And then Nancy's like, "We are the weirdos, mister."
Yeah.
And she just smiles at him. And then they like walk away wherever the hell. And they are in the middle of the forest, pretty much.
I think my shirt just says weirdos on it.
Oh, okay. Maybe. Yeah. So then they are all, getting together. They're in nature and they are doing this ritual.
Yeah.
And then they're doing this thing where they're in a circle and each one of them has a dagger that they've brought. And all of them are, saying, "It is better for you to rush upon this blade than to enter the circle with fear in your heart. How do you enter?" And they say, "With perfect love and perfect trust," and they give a kiss to each one. So each one of them is doing this to each other and all that. I think, I know that Nancy does it to Sarah, and I'm pretty sure I'm sure Bonnie does it to Rochelle, and then Rochelle does it to Nancy, and then Nancy does it to Sarah. And so then they're like, as above, so below. So they stab the ground. Nancy stabs the ground with the dagger. They each... Okay, she showed me a photo of the shirt. But they each, one of them, prick their finger and they put it into a chalice, like a goblet. And they all put wine in there, and each of them are casting a spell. So one of the spells is from Rochelle, where she says, "I drink of my sisters, and I ask for the power to love myself and love those who don't love me, especially racist pieces of shit like Laura Lizzie." She takes a drink. She then passes it to Sarah. Sarah says, "I drink of my sisters, and I wish for the power of love," or something like that, and the admiration of Chris, which we can get into. But anyway, she has this picture there, and she wants to put a love spell on him. Bonnie then drinks, and she says, "I drink of my sisters, and I ask for the power of beauty," and all this stuff, whatever. And then Nancy is then, "I drink of my sisters, and I wish for all the power of Manal." And she finishes off the goblet, the chalice, or whatever, whatever it is. And then they say, "Blessed be." And they're like, "All right, cool." So they're just like, "All right, cool, we did all this." But then they see that a bunch of butterflies are raining down on them, kind of, and all coming into their shot, pretty much. Be like, "Oh my God, he's listening to us. He's listening to us. This is great." And again, they're just kind of like, "Okay, cool. I guess we did this spell. It all, makes sense. All right, cool, great, wonderful." So then we start to see each person getting their wish.
Yes.
So then we see, I believe it is Sarah, Yes, Sarah starts getting infatuated, Chris starts becoming infatuated with Sarah. Just off the rip.
Last time we left off, he was like,
he was a dick. But now he's like, "Oh, hey, Sarah, I'm, coming up," and be like, he's just in love with you now. And they're even walking to mass. And they're saying, "Oh, hey, this, that, and the other." So they're saying, "Oh, I'm fine, whatever." Be like, "Are you going to tell your friends that you're a big lying sack of shit?" And he's like, "Oh, I wasn't thinking of it, but yeah, I'll tell them tomorrow." So he himself has just fallen in love with her. Mm-hmm. She has him carry her books, mm-hmm. and they sit at mass together. And even Rochelle's like, "Look at her spell, it's working. This is great." So then you have that. We then see Rochelle, I believe, at practice, where we see that, and we see that Laura is getting out of the pool. We might be moving a little forward, I don't know. But she's in the pool, she's coming out, she takes off her swim cap as Rochelle is about to dive. And we see that Laura is starting to... Or no, wait a minute. I'm sorry about that. So we do see Sarah actually walking down the hallway. Mm-hmm. And we see her pulling out Laura's hair. And she calls her, Laura calls her a stupid bitch. And she pulls out, she's like, "I thought I saw a bug. They have shampoo for that." So they have that. And then actually I think what had happened was, but that's the first thing. You see that Sarah and Chris, her love spell works. So all right, great. Awesome. So you have this.
And they pulled her hair so they can do the spell for Rochelle.
Yes. They do the spell for Rochelle. And I think either before this or after it. I think it was before it, actually. I think it was before this at some point. Yeah, I think it was before this, where they have the little sleepover, and it's really cute, where they're, like, at somebody's house. I think it might be Sarah's house. And they're, like, hanging out together. They're saying, oh, well, Sarah's like, oh, have you ever played Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board? Mm-hmm. And so this is the scene where they play Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board, where they're in the room. They're at Bonnie's house. They're at Bonnie's house. And so, because it's her mom there. And this is before Bonnie gets her wish, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I don't think it's happened yet. But they're like, oh, have you ever played this? So here's what you do. You put your fingers under the girl. And Nancy says, you put your fingers where? And she makes this, like, fingering motion, of course. Right. But anyway, so they do this. They have her levitate off the ground. They have Rochelle on the floor, and they're levitating her. And she's like, guys, it's not working. And then they're like, oh, shit, no, it is working. She's like, shut up or you're going to fall. Like, don't talk. And then we get this, like, shot where Rochelle's in the air. And then they're like, oh, my God, we did it. And then Bonnie's mom comes in with, like, towels or whatever, and then she falls on the ground. Yeah. And then the mom's just like, are you guys getting high? Yeah. And then that's all funny. So there's that. And again, I think that's where we have, like, you know, pulling the hair and all that. Yeah. Because then we get into... We're getting into the dive, but this comes before that, because there's a reason why what happens to Laura happens to Laura. So then, because it hasn't happened yet, because I believe it is that... It either is before this, but we see that Laura is starting to lose some of her hair. So it either comes before this, but what had happened was that Sarah was braiding Laura's hair into Rochelle's or whatever, because they were at her house. Oh, and so they were doing that.
Got it.
Yeah, so they probably did that before the dive happens.
That makes sense.
But they pull her hair out beforehand.
They were doing like a sleepover. Right, they did it.
They were doing that.
I didn't realize that I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, they were doing that. I
saw the braid part. Yeah. But I did not realize it was...
That's probably why they were doing it. Yeah. So there's that. So she's doing that. And then this is where Rochelle asks, like, who's that? And be like, oh, that's my mom. Like, you know, she died when she was having me, blah, 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 all this. And then in the meantime, you see Nancy is with Bonnie, and she's doing this whole spell where Bonnie is just saying, Manal, take my scars. And they're just kind of, Nancy's just kind of like doing this motion. And then you just see that, like, you know, Bonnie is like, Mono, take my scars. Mono, take my scars. You know, and she's starting to cry to herself, pretty much. But they're both doing that because then, respectively, the next scenes we have are the dive where Rochelle does a really great dive, and we find out that Laura Lizzie's starting to lose her hair. And then we have Bonnie goes back to the doctor to see if the treatment worked for the, you know, fucking little, you know, needle shit. Mm-hmm. And then that is when we see that the treatment, quote unquote, worked. And now they're able to, her scars have all now gone away. And so, and it, of course, it's like, you know, 90s special effects where they just put whatever the fuck on there. And it's just like, they're just scraping it away at this point, right. Which is very satisfying to watch. But anyway, so now her skin is clear. Right. She doesn't have her scars anymore. And Bonnie's a new bitch. Let me tell you something. She's a new bitch. She's new. The doctor's like, oh my God, it worked. Oh my God, it worked. And so, you know, that's when...
the treatment.
Yes. Then Bonnie comes into school, feeling herself. They're in class and, you know, all the girls are together. Be like, she was supposed to be here. She walks up in there. Brand new girl. So brand new. All right. So yeah, Bonnie's a new bitch now because she ain't got no more scars. Okay. She walks up in there feeling herself in the classroom.
Finally.
Of course. Right. And so like Mitt, Breckin, Meyer is all like, you know, hey Bonnie. And then they're like actually paying attention to her now. And so they're just like, they're all outside and they're like, oh my God, you look so good. Like, you know, blah, 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 all this good stuff. And then, you see Nancy's kind of pissed. She also has this short hair now, which I'm just like, when did that happen? But okay. And she walks away because she's all mad because her spell's not working. You know, because Rochelle even says, she's like, well, you have Chris loving you. Like, Laura's hair is falling out. And like, Bonnie looks so pretty. And so like, Nancy just kind of storms away. And she's like, what's wrong with Nancy? Like, Sarah's like, what's wrong with Nancy? And she's just like, I don't think her spell's working. Be like, what did she wish for again? And be like, I think she'd wish to not be white trash or whatever. And she's like, you know, this is kind of a funny line a little bit, but she says like, she's like, and Rochelle was like, and honey, like, you just gotta, you're white. You just have to deal with that.
Right.
So I'm just like, okay. But then we go into the next scene where I believe it's that Nancy's home. She comes back to her house. Her mom and her, whoever the fuck he is, the boyfriend or new husband or whatever, I don't know. But they're at home. The guy, like, touches her really inappropriately.
Yeah, like, she goes to get, like, something out of like, food, a drink or something.
And she's like, right, exactly.
And tries to touch her, like, her butt.
Yeah, right. And the mom's even like, you're supposed to be like a father to her, blah, blah, blah. She ain't my kid or whatever. And then playfully, the mom hits the guy, but then he's like, don't you ever hit me, whatever. And then that's when Nancy's like, stop. And then she makes like something explode. And then while her mom is trying to like put the fire out, we then, see that she's calling, whoever this guy is a pig, and pretty much then has a cardiac arrest moment going on. Yeah. And then, the ambulance comes, they take him to the, I assume a hospital or whatever, but he dies. We find out he dies. And so then they're back in their little trailer or whatever. And so they're there. It's her mom that's there and it's Nancy that's there. They're both just smoking. While this guy, who is either a lawyer or he is from the company, he might be just a lawyer, I think. But he is saying like, before we give this policy over to you, we need to go over a few details. And the mom's like, what policy are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? And the guy's all like, oh, like, Mr. Whoever was like, he had a pension plan through us, all this. And when it comes to this type of figure, we have to have somebody sign off on it, whatever. Be like, what figure do you mean? And he's like, okay, give me a minute. And then he's like, he had a policy for $175,000. And then they're just like, which by today's standards, I looked at it online and I believe it is that it would now be worth about $330,000. Okay. So still, they're just like, $175,000. Like, oh my God, like we're rich. Which is like, okay, cool. So then, now, it's always been a point of thought when I've heard other episodes talk about it. $175,000. Now, granted, that is a fair amount of money. Okay? Right. That's a good amount of money you can get. However, when you're living in the middle of Los Angeles, which is expensive as shit, you're like, how do you make that work?
Right.
Plus, also, you see that they've bought a new house, a new condo. They have that condo, and we don't know how much that is. There's a Connie Francis jukebox that her mom bought.
Yeah.
We also see that Nancy has a car now, so I'm assuming they bought a car, apparently. Because we see her driving it later. I think that's somebody's car, obviously. Yeah. So I'm just like, how realistic is this that she'd be able to? Because I don't know if her mom works. Like, what the hell? Maybe they just bought that condo or whatever. But I'm just like, how are we going to keep this up, though, in Los Angeles? Like, how's that going to work? But whatever. Thinking too much on it. But anyway, the girls then come over. Bonnie, flirts with some guy because she's feeling herself now. And be like, you have a cute butt. And be like, come on, Bonnie, what the hell? So they all come over to the house. This is where we find out about the Connie Francis jukebox and, like, all this stuff. And then we see Nancy's new room. And it's, like, all fun, whatever. And they're just like, oh, like, your life is all nice now, blah, 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 blah. And so then they then move in. So later on the night, though, they're together and be like, hey, like, I think I can do this thing where I can, like, glamour myself to look different.
Yeah.
So they're doing this thing where,
which I always thought was a cool part of the movie.
It was, yeah, where they're all sitting together and then, like, Sarah's doing this little spell or whatever and she's like, and so it be. And then she's like, my eyes are brown now. They're usually green. And then Nancy's like, well, you can normally do that with contacts, like, whatever. And be like, okay, you want me to do something else? Like, okay, fine. So then she does this thing where she turns her hair from brown to blonde. And so she uses a similar trick. And then they're like, oh my God, like it worked. Like, that's so cool. So they touch the hair and they're like, oh my God, it's real. And then they're just like, oh my God, like Rochelle's like, make me a blonde. And she's like, no, we're not doing that. And then like Nancy says something like, do me next. And she's like, what do you want? And she's like, I want a smaller ass or whatever. So you see that there
like shakes the hair out and then it goes back to her
color. Yeah. And it goes back to her normal color. So it was like, okay, that's kind of fun. And this is showing the friendship that they seem to have. And then after this, it goes a little south.
Yeah.
So then we're seeing this, and then Nancy, though, begins to... Things are just not going well. We see that, okay, the love spell worked, but now Chris is obsessed with Sarah.
Right.
To the point where he's at her house at 3 a.m. and calling her, trying to get with her. Her dad has to, like, shine a light on him and be like, go away. It's, like, in the morning. She's even like... He's like, I want to move in with you and whatever. She's like, I don't want to commit like that. So there's that. And then, you have that kind of thing going on. But even before that a little bit, I believe that Nancy is like, hey, let's do this thing called invoking the spirit. So they go to the magic shop with Lirio, and they're like, Lirio is even like, you must be very advanced. Like, this is very dangerous to do. She's like, hey, girl, I know what I'm doing. Like, I can do this.
Right. She actually has money to put
She actually has money to pay for it.
Thing she wants. Yeah.
Exactly. So they're like, all right, cool, whatever. So then, but I think you do get a little bit of that going on where you see that Chris is really interested in Sarah. So you see a little bit of that before the invocation of the spirit. But then they go to this beach. This is also another iconic scene where each one of them has an animal. I believe Rochelle has a fish. Bonnie has a butterfly. Sarah has a bird. And Nancy has a snake. Again, more snakes in this movie. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so they are invoking the spirit, which means they're sitting around this beach. This is where Sarah then talks about how she used to have these nightmares where she would have snakes and bugs all around her and they wouldn't go away. Like, before she would kill herself. Like, before she attempted to kill herself, she would see these things. So we're like, okay, got it. So then, like, Nancy's talking about how serpents are, like, really powerful beings. They need to be respected. And then she even says, like, aren't you powerful? Whatever. Be like, all right, I guess we better move on. And so they invoke the spirit where each one of them is a different corner. Mm-hmm. I don't remember which corner they all are. I believe that Sarah is earth. I believe Rochelle's air. Nancy's fire. And then, Bonnie might be water, I think, or something like that. And we'll get into why we know she's fire in a minute. But anyway, so we have that. They invoke the spirit. They're all like hailing up to, and we then find out it's May apparently because she says on this May's Eve. So It's May apparently. But even during this scene, apparently in real life, there was some shit going on because apparently the lighting that they had like went out. The waves that were coming up were not intended to come up that far. So even the people who were there were like, oh my God, there was some shit going on when they were doing this shit, which is kind of crazy to think. But anyway, so that's really interesting. But you have all that going on. And then you see that Nancy, who is like doing this whole thing, she's even saying, fill me, Manal, fill me. And then she gets like struck by lightning.
Yeah.
And then all the girls are just like slept on the beach because that's what they were doing. So they all wake up, respectively. They see that Nancy is walking out of the ocean, just on water. Because why not?
Right.
And you hear her say, like, he's in me, like, I feel him through my veins. And this is just like, oh my God. Like, but they're kind of, like, even, like, Sarah's just looking like, what the hell? Like, what is going on here? Then we see the scene with the dead sharks.
Sharks, yeah.
And stuff. This is fucking Nancy going off the deep end at this point. Now that she has invoked the spirit, she's fucking crazy now. So, like, she says, these are my gifts. I'm your daughter now. Like, she's just all over the top with it. Cuckoo. Like, she is just going on with this. She then she has no empathy for anybody. She is engaging in these risky behaviors because she's now the main bitch now. This is, I believe, where we do have one of the scenes where after this all happens, because it seems crazy at this point. This is when they're driving in her new car. They're driving through the streets of LA. And each time they go to a stoplight, because at some point, I think these might actually happen beforehand, but like each one of the girls is starting to see like, okay, Bonnie has just become really self-centered, which she wasn't like that before. Her getting rid of her scars.
Getting rid of her scars.
I believe there's also another point where we see Rochelle is in the shower and she sees that Laura Lizzie has really lost her hair.
Yeah.
And this is a fucking eye roll because, like, Laura Lizzie's all like, it just keeps falling out. Like, I don't know what to do to deserve this. Yet you were racist, bitch. That's why you're losing your hair.
Right.
And you deserve it. But we'll get to you in a minute, girl. We'll get to you. But, it's just that. This is also, I think, where we also have Sarah. This is before this other thing happens, but this, I think, is where, like, Chris shows up at 3 a.m. and we start to see, like, okay, he's a little too interested in me and all this. So we see that it's starting to pick up a little bit. And then the invocation of the spirit, this is where, Nancy's gone off the deep end. And I believe there is this point where they're driving through the streets of LA, like I was saying, and she's glamoring the stoplights to go green, and they're not red anymore. And Sarah is saying, like, listen, like, this thing's going on with Chris. Like, I think it's getting a little out of hand. And this is also, I think, actually, no, wait, I do think this happens beforehand. The whole thing with Chris happens before they go to the magic shop, because even she asks Lario, like, I need to undo a love spell. And she's like, you can't undo a love spell. You have to let it run its course. But yeah, but there is this point where, like, Sarah's like, I think we're going a little too far, y'all. Like, This is just not cool. This is too much. Bonnie, you used to be so nice. Like, now you're a bitch. Now you're a bitch. Like, Rochelle, like, Laura Lizzie's hair's falling out. Nancy, like, you're paranoid. And she's like, paranoid? I'm not paranoid. What are you talking about? And then she says something about, like, the light won't always be green, Nancy. Like, you can't do that. And she's like, oh, are you scared, Sarah? Are you scared? And then they almost literally get into a car accident.
Right.
You're like, what the fuck? And this is just like Sarah being like, okay, I need to do something about this. I can't be staying around here. But then we get to that in a little bit, because then we have the scene of, I think Chris calls Sarah and is like, I need to see you. Like, let's do dinner or something, right?
Right.
And so then, okay, fine, let's do it. So then again, all this other stuff had already happened. Nancy's living her, like, new life. Bonnie's living her new life. Rochelle saw, the racist bitch's hair fall out. And then Sarah and Chris get together. And this is where I don't feel too conflicted about it, but I do want to talk a little bit about it. So they're in the car. They're in Chris's car. Mm-hmm. You can tell that he doesn't think. He even says, it's so weird. One day I woke up and I just wanted to see you, and I just wanted to be there. And you can see he has no thoughts of his own at this point, because everything, she even says something and he's all like, I was thinking that too. So he has no thoughts of his own, really. And she's just like, fuck, like, this is getting out of hand. And she even says, like, aren't we supposed to be at some restaurant? Like, what the hell's going on?
Dinner is,
Yeah, where dinner is. And he's like,
we're not
no.
just getting burgers and, like, hanging out in the car. Like, I thought we were going on
a date, right? And so he's like, no. But I feel... So then she's like, he's like, oh, let me give you a back rub. And she's like, I don't want a back rub. This is coming back to what you were saying a little earlier. Right. Like, she's saying, I don't want you touching me. I don't want you doing anything. And he just doesn't seem to get it.
Yeah.
And so he then, quote, he roughs her up a little bit. He tries to attempt to rape her. You don't see her actually get raped.
Like, he's trying to do the back rub, and she's like, get off of me. Like, I don't want it. Like,
but then she leaves the car.
In the passenger seat.
Yeah.
And he's in the driver, and she's, like, pushing him off. Like, he's, like, not on top of her, but he's, like, next to her. And
yes.
She's pushing him away, and then she was like, I need to, like, go.
Leave. I gotta go.
Like, this is his car or whatever. I need to, like, run away and, like, get away from him. And then, like, so she, like, because they're, like, I thought it was weird, like, they're at, like a point. Like a point, and then, like, there's a hill up there. Like, she runs up, or she's...
Which is what LA kind of looks like in those parts.
Which I guess makes... I'm not really familiar, so I don't know. So she's, like, starting to run. He's, like, running after her. He's like, hey, come back here,
Yeah.
Which is, like, fucking scary.
It's scary. So he doesn't actually, like, sexually assault her,
so she goes,
like, anything, but he is like, really creepy.
He's a guy, so of course he's gonna, like, overpower her. And she, like, I think she's trying to run up and she either, like, slips or whatever. Mm-hmm. He grabs her. And,
but we see her running away.
Yeah, you see that, like, I just want to touch on this. Like, you see that he has her in a position where he could do something to her. And
he kicks her in the... She kicks him in the balls.
She, like, sees him. I think. Well, there's a point, which we kind of... They do say in the next, like, couple minutes when she gets to... When she runs off. Mm-hmm. She's on the ground and she's looking up at him and he just looks like... It's not even him.
It really isn't. Yeah, she doesn't mention that.
Like, it doesn't look like... Maybe almost like a demon-like... Not like his
he
eyes
doesn't have anything behind his eyes.
Right. Like, it's not like there's, like, an actual monster, but it's like, it was just nothing there. And, you see that, like, he, is probably trying to, like, undo his pants, and he can't really do that. Yeah. Because he has, like, her hands kind of, like, bound. Yeah. And it's like, watching that when you're younger, I mean, it's not good, but, like, watching it when you're a little bit older, you're kind of wow, like, he was like,
he was about to do something.
He was trying to like do something that she was like clearly not like okay with.
So she's running through the woods.
She ended up kicking him in the balls, and he was and then she was able to run off. Yeah,
she runs off, and then she goes to Rochelle's house, which apparently there was a deleted scene where we were supposed to see Rochelle's parents.
I read that.
Yeah, but and they were supposed to just be very drab and boring and whatever. So
she's got like sticks and like leaves in her hair from like being on the ground.
And this is where she then says like, she then says she's like, like it wasn't even him. It was like, he had nothing behind his eyes. All this, and then Nancy's like, "Where is he? Like, there's a party tonight." Like,
she's like all disheveled looking.
She's all disheveled looking. She has the iconic black suit thing. She has like black dress thing and all this kind of stuff. So you're just like, okay. And she's just like, I'm gonna deal with this. And she's like, no, Nancy, like you don't need to. Let it be.
I got away.
She's like, no, we're gonna do this. So she then she walks up to the party, which apparently is at the guy Trey's house.
Yeah.
So like she walks up there being a bad bitch.
Yeah.
And
everybody's like, like whispering.
Yeah, they're like, oh, like Nancy's here, Nancy's here. And so they do that. The girls don't come in till later, but we see that Nancy takes Chris, who's already kind of drunk, and she takes him upstairs.
Yeah, because he thinks that Sarah's with you. He's like, is Sarah with you?
Yeah, Sarah with you, yeah.
He knows that they're...
And be like, oh no, like, just come upstairs with me. And then this is her saying, like, we've had some good times together, da-da-da. And she is seducing him.
Yeah,
trying to. And we see a fireplace in the background, which kind of is fun because then you have that she's the fire person.
Oh,
so there's that kind of a thing. And then, but Chris says, like, I don't, want to be with you.
He knows that she's Nancy. And he's like,
she knows,
fuck off,
fuck off, like, go away.
Pushes her away,
Pushes her away. And she's crying. She's just like,
and he's drunk. He's drinking.
He's drunk. So all that's going on. And then she then takes her hands and runs them across her face, and she then glamours herself to look like Sarah.
Yeah.
She still has Nancy's voice, but Sarah look. And so she's like, make love to me, Chris.
Well, actually, no, because no, I don't want to say it like that, but like she does that, like she's like rocking on the floor for like a couple seconds, and then she does that, and then he's drunk, so he's like, she was just in here like, I'm like, what the hell am I saying? Like, am I saying this? So she does look like Sarah, but like. She does say a few words, and it's not Nancy's voice.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right.
It's in Sarah's voice.
Yeah, at first it was in her voice, but yeah, you're right.
I don't think it's something that Sarah would actually have said, but it's Sarah's voice, not Nancy's.
Exactly.
You'd have been like, what the fuck? But then, of course, he's like looking at her like,
wait a minute, what?
Like that? I'm fucked.
He's just like, wait, what the fuck?
I'm hammered, yeah.
Yeah, so then the girls, so you see.
But then he's okay with it because it's Sarah. Yeah,
it's Sarah, and then he's making out with her and all this stuff.
And she's telling him, like, I want you to
make love to me, da-da-da. They're kissing. She, like, licks his face, and, like, it's a whole thing.
Yeah,
the girls then show up in a taxi because they're like, okay, she doesn't need to be here. We need to do something.
We need to get here.
Yeah, so Sarah goes upstairs. Actual Sarah goes upstairs. Rochelle and Bonnie are just downstairs, and this is where we have Laura Lizzie come up to Rochelle being, hey, how are you? In her terrible wig.
Yeah.
You deserve it, bitch. But I feel like something was cut at this point, because you can almost tell it was, because we really don't get much else of, like, we don't have Laura say much else about this whole situation. I feel like maybe they did, and they just kind of cut it. But then you see Sarah has gone upstairs. She goes in the room, and they're like, oh, okay. So now we see that Chris and Nancy are in bed together. Nancy is turned back into Nancy. Sarah is like, okay, what's going on here? And then Chris is just like, wait, what the fuck is going on?
At this point, he had she was laying down, and she was like that, and then...
And only a few minutes has passed, too.
Yeah, and then, so they were just, making out at the bed or whatever.
Yeah, so, 5 minutes went by, because we see the time.
She, comes in, and she's like, hey, look what's going on. And then, he sees that it's Nancy.
Yeah. And then this scares him.
Yeah.
And he's just like, wait, what's going on? What is this? And then this is when Nancy's, kind of saying, she's saying, why, that's why I'm here to forget and make you forget about her. Yeah. And be like, she's a witch too, The only reason you're in love with her is because she put a spell on you.
Right.
Sad, but true. That's why I'm here to help you forget about her. And then Sarah's just like, listen, Nancy, thank you. You scared the shit out of him. Let's go. And then she's just like, Nancy's like, no, he has to pay. Yeah. And this is an iconic scene, of course. Yeah. But even Chris is just like, well, you're just jealous. And then Nancy's just like, jealous? You don't even exist to me, And this is where you have the whole, you don't even exist. You see that Nancy is on her pointed toes and her boots are like levitating. And she is like, yeah. And so Sarah's probably just like scared out of her mind. She's like, what the fuck's going on? And she's all saying, you know, Nancy's saying all like, you know, you treat women like whores when you're the whore, and that's going to stop. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand? Yeah. And all he can say to this is just, I'm sorry. And then this is where you have the whole thing of, oh, he's sorry. He's sorry. He's sorry. Right. He's sorry. He's sorry. He's sorry. Sorry, my ass. And then you see Sarah scream like, no. And then Nancy is just screaming. And the window opens because he's in front of a window. And he falls back. He then falls and dies by falling out of the window. Yeah. And you hear this girl
could see
scream.
that, like, he fell out and then it was like that. And then he just fell out kind of like, flipped again. Yeah. And then he kind of just went like,
yeah. And you hear the scream in the back. And then Sarah's just like, oh, fucking fuck. Like, this is, I didn't mean for this to happen. Right. Because then we go right into the scene with her dad, where he's just like, it was an accident. He fell. And she's just like, don't touch me. Like, everything I do turns to shit. Everything I touch turns to shit. Like, you know, whatever. And so she's just like, this is bad. Yeah. This is very bad. And so her dad's just like, okay, whatever, fine, you know. Now, what I will say, though, is that, with this, I will say right here, right now, we already made it a point that, like, Laura Lizzie's a piece of shit, who's racist and deserved to have her hair fall out. Okay. So, that's one thing. She doesn't have much of a redeeming quality, in this, so there's that. And I don't want to make light, I'm not making light, but I don't want to forgive Chris because he's a piece of shit. Yeah. Generally. He himself is a piece of shit who already, before he was under a spell, was a piece of shit. Okay? So, but I don't think he deserved to die, obviously. Because even though he was a piece of shit beforehand and he was already being a piece of shit to Sarah, you still were trying to fuck with him. You still were like, I'm going to put a love spell on you. I still like you for God knows whatever reason. Yeah. And so then, just how Lirio told you, this stuff comes back in threes. She did mention that when they were back at the store, all of this stuff comes back to you in threes. So just be aware of that, you know? And it's just like really, yeah. Anyway, so it's really bad. That whole thing with the car either happens before the party or after the party. I don't remember which. But it's really showing that, like, listen, like, we've gone too far. Like, Laura's hair's fallen out. Chris is dead. Like, this is really bad, y'all. Like, it's not good, okay? But Chris, I don't think, deserved to die. Because he was not, and I think that's what makes it makes it even more fucked up. Because he didn't know, at that point, what he was doing. I don't think. He knew what he was doing when he lied about Sarah and all that stuff.
Right, he was being an asshole.
But he was being an asshole. But he didn't know when he was, like, low-key stalking her and, like, then almost assaulting her and all that. It makes it that much more fucked up because he didn't know what he was doing because he was put under a spell that you put on him. Right. So it's like, he's a piece of shit. He already was a piece of shit. But did he deserve to die? No. And that conflicts me a little bit because I'm like, he still was a piece of shit. So he didn't get to redeem. But in a way, I think that was something that they was trying to have a redeem for him. Not really, but like kind of. Because it's like, if anything, I feel bad that Chris died in that way. Because I'm like, he shouldn't have died in that manner. Because, you know, but there had to be a movie, there had to be a conflict. So, but I did just want to say that. Do you have any thoughts about that or anything like that? So it's a fucked up situation. So yeah, like, girl, like, Sarah's just like, I gotta get out of this thing. She attempts to do a binding spell on Nancy to help her not do harm to anybody. The car scene either already happened at this point, but we see that the coven at this point has turned on Sarah, because now they're just like, we don't need a fourth. They, you know, she's at school, she's in the bathroom, and she's hiding away, but then, like, the girls find her. They say, you know, she's just like, Sarah's just like, I can't do this anymore, you guys. Like, it's gotten out of hand, and we need to stop. And that's when they're like, well, we don't need a fourth, do we, girls? Like, no, we don't. And so this is also before that scene. We have the scene where Sarah's in bed, and she's looking at her double doors in her room, and then the double doors open and the girls fly in, and they're like kind of, you know, messing with her or whatever and all this. But then we have the scene in the bathroom where like they say like, you know, hey, like that's fine, like if you want to be out of the coven, but like, you know, just so you know, like don't do any more spells on me, because Nancy knew you tried to do a spell on her.
Yeah, and she was like, and in the olden days she was like, if a witch tried to leave their coven, they would, you know,
they betrayed their coven.
Or betrayed their coven.
Yeah. And so that whole thing is, then Rochelle has something of like, you know, sweet dreams, Sarah, you know, bye. And then even Bonnie's like, how are you sleeping? And then you can tell, you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't a dream, that was real,
right,
or whatever. So you're just like, okay, dude, like it's gotten out of hand, and Sarah's like, oh God, like this has gotten out of hand, this is really bad. So then at some point it's just gotten really, really fucking crazy, and she's just like, I need to get some help. So she goes to Lirio. She's like, listen, I know I don't know you very well, and I get it, but like, these girls are after me. It's these girls I came in with before. You know, the one, like, invoked the spirit. She's out of her mind now. Like, you know, you gotta help me. I don't know who else to turn to. She can't turn to her parents. She can't turn to anybody else. It's just really crazy. Lirio's then like, you know, listen, like, here's what this is. She takes her to the back room finally, which is like where she can invoke this, and that's where she's about to do it at.
Because I think she tells her
Lirio.
She said she sees like light in her, like light, yeah, like not darkness. She sees light.
Yeah, and this is where she says like, you're a natural witch, like you are somebody that this already came kind of natural to, because what you need to do is you need to pretty much invoke the spirit. That's what you have to do.
And that's what she tells her, and then she tells her that her mom was a witch.
Exactly, right. That's how she found that out. She's like, it came from your mom, like all this. But even like, you know, she's all like, Sarah's like, well, it turned Nancy crazy. And that's when Lirio says, like, you know, she takes it to a dark place. You wouldn't if you invoked it.
Just thought about this.
Yeah.
So remember I was telling you about the Jersey.
Oh, Jersey. Yeah.
Sorry, I just almost like forgot about that. So the 86, so it's like, you know, when you 86 something.
You kill it.
You kill it, or it's like that was like, it was saying like that was a foreshadowing.
Oh, okay.
Fate that he was wearing number 86, and like
I'll buy it.
Yeah.
So
I was like, oh, okay, so that's what.
Oh, okay, fun. But yeah, so but Lirio is like, you have to invoke the spirit at this point but she says like, you won't turn dark. It's not going to happen. Right? And let me do this. Let's do it. So she takes her in the back. She lights these candles all at once. And she's like, okay, I guess, like whatever, fine.
Right.
Gives her a book, I think, of how to do it. Mm-hmm. But then you see that, like, the storefront actually bursts kind of into fake flames, I guess. But, like, you know, they're following me. They're here. Like, oh, shit. So we're starting to wrap up on the film a little bit at this point. But she runs out of the shop. Mm-hmm. She then runs back home. And she's just like, oh, God, all right. So now Lirio's out of the story at this point. But she's run back home. She's trying to find her family because she's just like, okay, like, you know, hey, Dad, Jenny, like, where are you? And so she's just looking around her big old ass house. And so then she sees there's an open phone book or something that's on there. And then
Talk about phone books.
I talk about phone books. This is where you had all the phone numbers, everybody. And this is where you would try to find a number that you could call on your landline.
People that are not familiar with phone books, they are things that would have people's numbers in them. If you were in the phone book.
You could ask to not be, though.
You could also not be. But if you... They had, like, businesses, and then it had, like... I don't know what they used to call, like, the... You know, if, like, our phone numbers in there. Like, it would have, like, the last name, so it would be alphabetical order, and then it would have the phone number, and then obviously it was businesses. So it was good, like, if you know, oh, I need, like, a cleaning service, or...
Right.
I want to get food, or, you know, I need air conditioning, you know, so that is what a phone book was for. So
a phone book is
This is before, you know, Google and all that. Like, you would go, and then you go to C, like, cleaning, or A for air conditioning.
Yeah.
And you'd look and you'd see all these businesses and their phone number and all that, so.
Exactly. You know. Yeah. But anyway, so you have that, and then, exactly. But then somebody calls her.
Gotta shout out to these 90s.
I know, right?
Things that have.
But, so somebody calls her, it's Nancy. And Nancy's like, you know, hey, like, you know, there's been an accident. Like, sorry to hear about this. And so then the news turns on.
Turns it on, yeah.
And she sees that, because there was something written about a flight and whatever. Mm-hmm. And she says, like, they went back, they thought she ran away back to San Francisco, but there's been an accident. So she sees that apparently this flight it was crashed between LA to San Francisco, and that would have been the flight that they would have been on with no survivors. So she's just like, oh God, Jesus Christ. So she like drops down on the ground in like the crisscross position, and she's just like rocking back and forth. Yeah. The lights all turn off, and it's just like, oh Jesus, Lord in heaven. And then this is where you get the dark part, because there was already dark parts of it anyway, but this is what I very much remember as a kid. Mm-hmm. She then starts to try to leave her house. And this is where she starts to see all of the snakes. The maggots, bugs, cockroaches, rats, which apparently, so Robin Tunney was fine with doing this thing with like actual animals and actual insects and gross things, whatever, but she really hated rats. So when you see that the rat is on her shoulder, that's actually a stand-in. Yeah. Because she was like, I'm not doing that. Everything else I'll do.
I don't blame her.
And so, but this is where like the snakes are all outside, maggots. They're all like around her house. She goes to her bathroom, there's scorpions coming out of the fucking sink. There's like maggots in the fucking toilet. Like, it's a whole thing, dude. There's rats, like all of this. And it harkens back to before she had tried to kill herself. She would see these things. Right. They wouldn't go away. So then she's just like, oh God, it's not going away. It's not going away. All this. It's just like, that's what I remember. That was dark as fuck.
Yeah.
Because when you're like, oh shit. And fun fact, everybody, all of those things were like real. Mm. Like literally, like most of those bugs and all that stuff was all real. And they would just like procreate as bugs do. And it was a whole thing. So, it was gross. She gets in the shower and she's just like, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop. And then you see that Nancy's there. She's like, gotcha. And then you're like, okay, what are you doing? And this is where Nancy just doesn't give a shit what she says. She says, if I was as pathetic as you are, I would have killed myself ages ago. She like turns on the shower and like whatever. And then Sarah's just like, what the fuck is going on here? So then she goes downstairs. She sees Nancy, Rochelle, and Bonnie. And they're talking about like, you know, what are you doing here? Whatever. They're talking about how, like, you know, here because, you know, it's time to go, Sarah. It's time. You're going to kill yourself tonight. She's like, no, I'm not. And be like, well, you know, you'd have every right to do it. I mean, you killed Chris. You killed your mom. You killed your mom when you were coming out of her. Now that, I couldn't even sink that low. So bravo. And it's like fucking Sarah up because she already has issues to deal with. So, like, it just is very sad. And then, you know, her parents apparently are now dead, so you're just like, Jesus Christ almighty, like, what is going on here? And they're like fucking floating. And then they like, now is the end, let her go in peace. Now is the end, let her go in peace. I believe they do a thing where Nancy does it where it's like, what happened to your scars, Sarah? And she reopens her scars. And she's like, it's not real. And then she's like, well, why are you still bleeding? She's like, bleeding. There's like a suicide note that says, I killed Chris. I'm sorry. But I didn't write that. And be like, same handwriting's the same. And so they're just, and even Rochelle says something like, you know, why didn't she use magic on us? And then Nancy's like, weak, and all this. And she even says like, oh God, you're so disgusting, you know, and be like, run up to your room, you know, run up. And she's just like, and so then Sarah again plops down on her room, in the floor. She's just like, oh God, it's cause she had to get a thing to like, for her wrist cause she's bleeding. And she's just like, oh God, what do I do? Like, what the hell? Like, and so she's like on the floor of her room and she then sees the picture that she had in the beginning, where it's her mom and her mom's picture starts to move. And
because it's like she's by trees.
She's by trees and they start to move and everything. And, like that, and it's like, you have the power. You've always had it.
Yeah. And like her mom, like, she's like kind of like looking off in the distance and she kind of like looks.
Yeah. So then this gives her the chance to like invoke the spirit. So she's laying on the ground of her room and she's like, okay. And she's just like starting to do the chant of like, hail to the powers of the Watchtower of the North and all this stuff to invoke the spirit like they were earlier.
Right.
So she's able to do that and you see that. In the meantime, you see that the 3 girls are downstairs. So Nancy's looking out the window, and then Bonnie and Rochelle, she says, like, go upstairs or I'll slit your throat. Check on her, see what's going on.
Yeah.
And so then you see that Bonnie and Rochelle walk by a mirror, and they see their stuff times 3 back to them.
Right.
So you see that Rochelle has, like, her hair's fall out, and then Bonnie has, like, a Freddy Krueger fucking
like on the face, it's like
on the face,
like,
yeah.
Right.
So then they're like, oh, not again, like, you can't do this, and this scares them enough. So then you're like, okay, like, I'm gonna run out and be like, where are you going? What are you doing? Where are you going? And so then Nancy just has to walk up there herself now, and then this is still her trying to invoke the spirit, all that kind of stuff. Nancy's like, Sarah. She's like looking for her, being like, where the hell are you? Like, where are you at? Like, because by this point she's thinking like, all right, I killed her. Like, great. This is awesome. And then you see that Sarah has actually put herself inside of a mirror and now walks out of the mirror.
Yeah.
And it scares Nancy. She's like, did I frighten you, Nancy? I'm sorry. And then she's like, what are you doing here? Why aren't you dead? And then she's like, he saved me, Nancy. And, I talked to him and you're in deep shit. You abused the power that he gave you and you're in deep shit pretty much. And so then you see that like bugs start to be in like Nancy's hair. And then you see that like these fucking 90-ass special effects. Her hands turn into snakes and like her mouth is filled with bugs and like all this stuff going on, of course. And Sarah's just like, relax. It's only magic. So she's putting it back on her because Nancy did the same thing to her. So she's doing the same thing to Nancy. And then Nancy's all like, I'm sorry, Sarah. Like it got a little out of hand. Sorry. Like, I'm sorry. Cause now she's just backtracking and wanting to backtrack.
Right.
And so now it's like, okay, like, this is when now Sarah's finally able to do the binding spell on Nancy, where she's like, I bind you, Nancy, from doing harm to yourself and harm to others and all this. But Nancy's like, wait. And then this is where like Nancy gets her knife that she has and she's like trying to kill Sarah. She's just like, I'll kill you stuff. And this also was nominated for a fight on the MTV Movie Awards.
Was it really?
It was. I don't think it won. Maybe it did. I don't remember. But it was. And anyway, so they're fighting and then something happens where I think Sarah or somebody, all of her like, because there's all these papers flying around and everything like that. And then there's like this dresser that moves and it pretty much squishes Sarah, I guess.
Yeah, or so it would look.
So it would look. And so then she's like, okay, where are you? Like, Sarah, Nancy's like, where are you? And she's like picking up the papers and she's moving things and all this kind of shit. And then she's just like, okay, tricky. Like, she's trying to look for her. And then she ends up finding Sarah, who had made herself invisible. She then reappears and then she kicks Nancy pretty much. Where she kicks her where she goes all the way.
They did win Best Fight.
Oh, look at that. They won Best Fight. There you go.
Fairuza Balk versus Robin Tunney the Craft in 1997's MTV Movie Awards.
Yes. We did talk about that in our Cruel Intentions episode, I think. But anyway.
Looking at that Best Fight. Yep. It was Matthew Broderick versus Jim Carrey, the Cable Guy. Okay. Jim Brown versus Alien Mars Attacks. Jackie Chan versus Ladder. Police Story 4. First Strike. Pamela Anderson. Lee, when she was married to Tommy Lee. Versus Bad Guy, which I don't know any of those. I do remember Cable Guy.
It was in Barbed Wire.
Barbed Wire.
Yes.
But yes, they actually did one Best Fight.
That's fun. I love that. Good for her. But anyway, so yeah, she kicks Nancy into this mirror, and she then is able to bind her. So she then's like, I bind you, Nancy. Because it did show,
I don't know, I was trying to look that up. It had like her like outfit.
Mm-hmm, yeah, her outfit where she made herself invisible, and then she kicks her and all that. And then Nancy's just on the ground and it's all done. And she's like, I bind you, Nancy, from doing harm to others and harm to yourself and all this.
She's like, no.
And fun little fact, that was supposed to be the end of the movie. It was supposed to end there.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
But then they were like, oh no, it's too dark. Because at that point you're like, okay, so Bonnie and Rochelle ran. We don't know what happened to Nancy. And then we also assume that, like, Sarah has no parents anymore, I guess. So we're just like, shit.
Right.
Apparently it was supposed to be the end. So then they do have this little coda at the end where we see that they're packing up. So Sarah and her family are packing up to move because they're just like, we gotta move from here.
Yeah, but we're leaving.
I think we're leaving. I think we're gonna go somewhere else. But Sarah's packing up the car, and then Bonnie and Rochelle come back. This is probably a few months after they shot, perhaps. It's a reshoot more than likely. And so then they're just like, you know, how are you doing, Sarah? Like, how are you? And she's like, I'm fine, but now, you know, I can sleep, so that's good. And then they're like, you know.
Very, like, passive-aggressive.
It's passive-aggressive, but, like, she kind of deserves to be passive-aggressive a little bit. Yeah, and she's all like, they're all like, you know, do you, you know the whole thing with, like, the plane crash? Because they see her dad. Be like, hey, girls. Hey, Mr. Bailey. Like, you know, that whole thing was just like a practical joke, you know, and like, how funny.
Yeah.
And be like, do you have any more powers? Because we don't. And she's just like, no, whatever, I don't know. I'd be like, well, we should get together sometime. Be like, call, you know, hold your breath until I call. It'll be fine. And then they kind of snidely say under their breath, they're like, probably doesn't need any powers anymore anyway.
Right.
And then we see that she does still have powers because she makes a large tree branch from one of the trees
She takes the nature and, like, it's all very windy. And then,
her stuff's all, like, flying around.
Makes them fall. Like, well, the tree branch falls and then, like, it
in
makes
front
them
of
kind of, like, to get out of its way, they fall.
Yeah. And then the closing end line for Sarah is that, be careful, you don't want to end up like Nancy. And so then you see that Nancy is in a mental institution. Yep. She is like chained to not chained, but she's trained to this bed. Yeah. And and then this nurse comes in and like pokes her with a needle. She's like, ow, ow. And she's like, the nurse says some sort of comment or whatever, but she's like, I'm flying. Like, I'm flying. Yeah. And then that's how it ends. And she's like, has scratches all on her face. Yeah. And you just see that Nancy has turned into this, like, kind of, you know, she's just turned into this, like, mentally ill person or crazy person. And that is the end of The Craft. So, yeah, that is the end. So like I said, with this film, it definitely has a cult following, people who watched it when they were young. I think it's fair to say that however you thought of it when you were young, it'd be a little different if you watch it when you're a little older.
Right.
Because this isn't a story about sisterhood. It's very much toxic and really bad. But, you know, Sarah lives in the end, which is good. And, you know, everyone, except for Chris, I guess, lives in the end generally. But, you know, it's like, I can see why people liked it because, you know, this is a story about these girls. Very much, you know, in the vein of something like a Clueless or a Jawbreaker or whatever you want to call it, you know, where it's female-led with the cast and everything, and it's about these girls who have strong personalities. Like I said, I see why there are people who like to watch this during the spooky time of the year or whatever else, but yeah, overall, it's a perfect... I do give this movie a little bit of credit for being something original. It is crazy how literally you were talking earlier that, like, this and Scream came out the same year, had two of the same actors in it.
Yeah.
And it's an original story. And it has been something that it got a horrible remake sequel or whatever, but it also has been, you know, it's been referenced in different things and in different shows and even in, we talked about it on Clueless, but Do Revenge even has, like, the witches of the school, which I thought was, obviously harkening back to The Craft. So I think this movie is at least worth a watch once, maybe.
Yeah.
If you love this movie, no hate, but, you know, for me, I'm like, it's a 3 for me. It's a 3 out of 5, perhaps, you know, and, right now, at least. Generally, you can find it. So it's on HBO and AMC Plus right now. We are recording this early, but generally it makes the rounds. It's been on Tubi before, so you maybe find it there, depending on when you're listening to this. It makes the rounds during spooky season, I think, too. Yeah. So, like, they'll have it on there. I would even say rent it, like, once if you've never seen it. You know, like, that would be something. I don't know if I'd buy the blue of this necessarily, but maybe I would, just to have it in my collection. But, yeah. But yeah, Sarah, do you have any fun little closing remarks like Jerry Springer or anything? You know, he had his closing stuff.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think this movie I can see why people like it. I can see why people enjoy it. You know, it has its flaws. It did do some cool stuff in there too, but generally, you know, it's not a movie I'm like going up for all the time, but it's something that's worth a watch at least. But Sarah, I do want to thank you so much for being on my pod. You know, we've been recording for however long now, but you know, it was always a delight and always wonderful. And, thank you so much for coming on today. I guess blessed be everybody. Blessed be. As always, if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can do so at cultcinemacircle@gmail.com. In case you want to give any movie recommendations, give feedback on the show, or if you just want to say, hey, I'm open to all of it. You can also follow the Cult Cinema Circle podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram handle is Cult Cinema Circle, and Twitter handle is Cult Cinecircle. On those platforms, I tend to announce the different episodes I'm going to be doing. I'll make little Instagram stories when we have an episode drop and just generally interact with anybody on there that wants to interact with me. You can also follow me on Letterboxd at Jesse, Jesse, Kremp, Kremp, all one word. On there, I log the movies that I watch and write little reviews about them and just general foolishness over there. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast on your podcatcher of choice, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm pretty much out there everywhere. Be sure to leave 5 stars and a 1 to 2 sentence review so we can grow the audience more and also just spread the love all around. Be sure to tune in next week to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast, where I'll be covering 1997's The Fifth Element. In 2257, a taxi driver is unintentionally given the task of saving a young girl who is part of the key that will ensure the survival of humanity. As always, thank you for taking the time to listen to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast, and remember, we are the weirdos, mister. Take care. Bye.